right. Here we are. We are live. Ready for a brand new live stream. Wonderful. So let me get a few things situated here. Get ready to roll, and we will dive into the fun. Give me just a second. You guys get to see all the other stuff popping up on my screen too. All right, let's see. Yeah, there's my thumbnail. Where is doop-doop-doo? There we go. And I'm gonna move this up here. I don't think anyone's tuned in yet, so I can do a little housekeeping here really quickly. Ooh, that's good. All right, I'm learning new things. Hey, JK Lowell, how you doing? Ready to go? You ready to do this? Okay. Got to give props for the happy Sunday. Yes, absolutely happy Sunday. Oh, I want to try something really quick too. What happens if I, channel add as moderator move. Okay, I still don't know. There's a way when people live stream that they're talking to, they're replying to a comment and they put the comment on the screen. And I have no idea how you do that. I don't know what magic you have to do to make that happen. But I mean, it's not a big deal right now because there's not really any comment I'm trying to put on the screen, but maybe it's just the super chats you can do that with. Maybe you can't do it with regular comments. I don't know, because I'm clicking on the messages here and it doesn't seem like there's any opportunity to do that. So that's fine though. Whatever. That's not a necessary component of the live stream. So we'll roll along without that amazing feature. But hey, John, I don't know if that's John S. Marsh or John Smarsh, but I know you're one of my members. I appreciate it. And you actually caught me. So yes, thank you. And welcome, Grumpy. Good to see you. So gaming on the other monitor, that's a good way to go. I mean, multitasking is key. Yeah, see, I have options like I can put people in timeout. That sounds so second grade. Like I could say, "Oh, Grumpy, you pissed me off. You're in timeout." But I don't know how to pin it on the screen. But that's neither here nor there now. So let's roll into this. Let me get my notes up. Tonight's live stream is brought to you from Sutter Home Moscato. Now, here's a little tip. I know you guys don't really tune in for dating advice, but ladies, if a gentleman has bought the 1.5 liter of Sutter Home Moscato, ooh, he's really into you. That's you're gonna have a special night right there. And when you get the 1.5 liter, I know a lot of my viewers are actually international, so I don't know if Sutter Home is a brand that you would see overseas, but trust me, this is definitely fine wine stock right here. This is like nth tier. So if you're doing the Sutter Home Moscato, that's because you are really turning it up tonight and you are going to have a fine night. So even if you're not on a date, even if you are stuck watching some angry atheists live stream, nevertheless, you can still turn up the Moscato. Hey, 4Aztecas, how you doing? All right. So let's roll into this. The first thing that I wanted to share tonight, before we get into the comments, because I've kind of turned the live stream into my live version of God's Troll Army. But before we get into that, I did have one thing I wanted to share with everyone because I just thought it was kind of cool. Quick background. I'm sure you guys probably watched these videos because the people that are in right now watch a lot of my stuff. But several weeks ago or a month ago, whatever it was, I did this video here, 3 reasons that fulfilling the law doesn't mean what pastors say. And I even said in the video, like I tagged people, like people that have expertise in the Bible and, the people that can read the original Greek and the Hebrew, but no one answered me. And that's fine. I didn't actually expect to get a direct response. But I am going to share with you that I have a response from Dan McClellan. He had a live stream. So essentially I paid him to answer me, which it's fine. It's like when your mom has to pay your friends to hang out with you, like I threw him a few dollars on a, super chat. And he answered my question. Of course, it's in a brief format because he's just kind of churning through these super chats. But the original question that I wanted to get some input from any scholarly person who knows more about this shit than I do was, if you actually read like the original Greek, because that's what the book of Matthew was written in. It was written in Greek. I believe it was written in Koine Greek. It says, well, here, I'll pull it up really quick. I know you guys have probably already seen this 50 times now, but for anyone who's watching the stream later, this is what I'm about to show you Dan's response to, because I did a couple of videos talking about this. And specifically, what I was really focusing on was this beauty right here, which is Jesus talking. This is the Sermon on the Mount, right after the Beatitudes. And he says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." Hey, James. And if you know anything about Christianity or about Christian apologetics or about the way that the Christians churn this in their favor, I mean, on the surface level, this is Jesus telling you that all of the old laws apply. All the Mosaic laws, everything in Leviticus, everything in Deuteronomy, all of that old shit, it still applies. And it's not just this one verse or this one sentence. He actually goes on to some, longer extent, making it painfully clear. But so many times, Christians say that, oh, that's why we don't have to. That's why we don't have to follow the law, because Jesus fulfilled it, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There is no other context in which fulfilling a law then makes the law go away. The example that I always use for this is that the law is that every year I have to pay my taxes. Last year I paid my taxes. I fulfilled the law last year. That doesn't mean that this year I don't have to pay my taxes. I still have to pay my taxes. Just because I fulfilled the law last year doesn't mean that now I no longer have to worry about the law. No, it's a law that every year you have to pay taxes. It's an ongoing law. It doesn't have any sunset period. It doesn't expire. But Christians will read this exact sentence that I have highlighted here on the screen, and with no sense of self-awareness, they will look you in the eyes and say, yeah, that's it. He fulfilled the law. Like, we don't have to follow it anymore. Like, what do you mean? That makes no sense. So that's the context. So this is what I asked Dan McClellan in his live stream. Let me pull it up for you. I'm not sure if the audio, I think if I just turn my audio up really high on my speaker, hopefully it comes through. It's only like a minute. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this. I'm sure it probably won't sound good if it's not automatically piped through here, but I'm figuring out.
That 517, is there any logical way that fulfill can possibly mean that the law goes away? Any translation of the original Greek that would justify the apologist's position on this? I don't think there's an argument that makes that the most likely reading. I think that is very clearly an apologetic attempt to skirt around what the author seems to be saying, because throughout the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus very clearly expects everybody to continue to follow the law of Moses. Now, he interprets some things slightly differently from the way we would imagine they would have interpreted things in this time period and the way the Pharisees interpreted things, but Matthew never represents him saying that the law of Moses is going away. The only things that go away are the things that he supersedes with a higher law, an even harder law to live.
So I hope you guys could hear that. But that's Dan McClellan replying to my super chat on his live chat. So it wasn't surprising to me. I figured that would be the answer, but when I did, that original video, I really wanted to know, hey, for those of you who actually know how to read this in the original languages, is there any plausible reading by which you could say, yeah, this is Jesus trying to tell us that the law went away? And Dan, in that reply, said what I thought he would. I mean, he confirmed that, yeah, there's no logical way that you could read it this way unless your entire intention is to say, I don't want to follow the law anymore. And then you can twist it any way that you want to, because that's what people do when they don't want to follow the old stupid laws. They make up any excuse possible, even though it is their Lord and Savior, their God-man, Jesus Christ himself, who explicitly told them over and over and over again, and this being the clearest example of that, hey, you got to follow that law. But they're never going to care. They're never going to listen. They don't care how hypocritical it is. They don't care that there's no logic in what they're saying. They don't care. So that was I wanted to start the show tonight with my little thing from Dan McClellan, because it was this cool to get him to reply directly to the concern that I had. And even though I figured that would be his reply, it was refreshing to see that, yes, Dan McClellan agrees with me. Not that Dan makes everything right, but I'd rather be on the side of interpretation that Dan's on than the other side in most cases. So that was cool. I want to introduce some friends to the show today, because somebody, when I put up the post saying that I was going to, maybe I was going to do a live stream today, somebody said, fine, but you need to have a Caesar plushie and a knife, because today is the Ides of March, right? Well, I don't have a Caesar plushie, but my house is equipped with many, many plushies. So I thought it was appropriate today to bring on scary biblical Bible plushie thing, something. I don't know if it's supposed to be cherubim or seraphim or, whatever. It's guest number one. And then we also have like Bible demon thingy. There we go. So we need names for these. I think these need to be regular guests on the show. And I think that, they can't just be random Bible thing. There's like Demon Fellow and there's Angel Fellow, and we need names for them. So let me know what you think the names should be. It will be an important vote. That this might be the most important thing that you do all year in terms of helping me to determine the names of our new mascots. So I might even bring them on like other videos. So maybe there'll be like a permanent fixture or something. I mean, I'm always on a green screen, so there's never like shelves behind me, but nevertheless, I think that they're welcome guests today. I'm not going to take a knife to either one of them. I don't think that my wife would appreciate that. She probably wouldn't let me take any more of her plushies again if I did that. So Neffy, that's a good one. Yeah, Neffy. So we have one cool suggestion there. So I'll move those off to the side for now, but you have to appreciate today's special guests. Beelzebuddy. That's really good. I like that. Secular Scriptures. Beelzebuddy. I mean, those two names alone, Neffy and Beelzebuddy, those are really, really top notch right there. Good on you guys for coming through. But I mean, other people can feel free to put other suggestions there. So we won't make the decision right away. We'll give the masses time to vote. We'll make sure that everyone's voice is heard, because this is a democracy. Wait, no, it's not. But we can pretend it is anyway. All right. So into the commentary. Gotta wet my whistle. Grumpy's changing his vote to Beelzebuddy. Well, I mean, we need two names. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be either or. We can get other name suggestions, but right now we need at least two names. So Neffy and Beelzebuddy that's I guess this would be Neffy and this would be Beelzebuddy. So I'm liking that. Jeff or Jeff. We could vote for Jeff too. It could be Jeff and Eric or something. I don't know. But we'll let that percolate. And as new ideas come to your mind, share them in the comments. But we are starting strong with Nephi and Beelzebub. I don't know if Jeff is really staying in that strong tradition, but we're not taking it out of the running yet, so we'll see. Okay, so let's get into some comments. All right, so this one comes from Kostek, who's replying to my synopsis video on the book of Joshua. And he says, this guy didn't get what he wanted from God. Yes, I didn't get what I wanted from God. And now he thinks he has to destroy Christianity by criticizing a book he takes literally and don't understand. Man, learn how to read and understand books and get a life instead of wasting time criticizing something you don't even believe in. Maybe start criticizing your own very smart worldview, which led to some of the worst regimes and genocides in history. Parenthetically, Nazis and communists. Oh, okay. Okay. This is a fun one to start with, isn't it? I will say, before I even talk about any of the particulars here, that the pattern amongst Christian dissenters in the comments is almost always the same. You know, I have people who like my stuff and they say, attaboy. I have people who like my stuff, but they say, you know, they help me on some point I don't understand, or they challenge me on some point, and that's great. But for the people that are clearly butthurt Christians, they never, ever actually engage with any of the points that are in the video itself. You could have a 10-hour video that just spits out fact after fact or finding after finding, and you could show all of your work, you could show the Bible verses, and you could have a professor on behind you saying, yeah, that's the right interpretation, and you could have a priest. I mean, you could do all of this homework, and at the end of it, if a Christian doesn't like it, they'll just put some butthurt reply that does nothing to address even one of the points in the video. I've mentioned this before, of course, but it never fails to just kind of blow me away sometimes that, you know, you can't even engage with anything in the video. I don't expect you to do some point-by-point refutation of the entire video, but when you can't even be bothered to latch onto anything at all and provide any type of meaningful critique, but yeah, yay, Christians. But you know, every part about this is just funny. You know, I'm doing this because I didn't get what I wanted from God. Yeah, like I had a laundry list, or, you know, grocery list or something, and he came back with, you know, the wrong type of Doritos, and now I'm mad. So I guess that's why I'm doing this. Of course, most of these people who reply in such a way haven't even watched any of my other videos. They just somehow stumbled across one of my videos, and I understand most people are not going to watch all of my videos, or even most of my videos. I don't expect you to. It's not required reading. But sometimes you can tell that they don't even know anything about me or my channel. They just stumbled across this because maybe I have certain tendencies, but I would challenge most people to really say that it sounds like I didn't get what I wanted from God. I mean, I'm very happy with, I can tell you exactly what I got from God. Nothing. And that's okay. And that to me was just one more piece of solid evidence that made me say, he ain't there. He's just not there. It's not that I didn't get some specific thing that I was looking for. I wasn't praying for a new car. I wasn't praying to hit the lottery. I was just trying to get through my day, you know, my life as best I could. But it just became increasingly obvious as decade after decade went by that there is nothing that he's giving me or anyone else, and that everyone who claims to have received these things from God are always going off about things that would have happened anyway. You know, it was a beautiful sunny day, and that's what God brought to them today. Or they didn't get they avoided a car wreck on the way to work, and that was what God did for them. If you want to see God in everything, you will see God in everything. But otherwise, you're not getting anything from God. It's just not there. So, but then he says now he thinks he has to destroy Christianity by criticizing a book he takes literally and don't understand. The literalism, I've mentioned this before, but it is fair to some extent. Yeah, I've heard some people say that, it's not like all Christians believe this stuff literally. And I get that. I mean, when I was a Christian, I did not take most of this stuff literally. But there's two problems with that. One is that there is a disturbing percentage of people in this country, at least, that absolutely do take it literally. If there were only 1% of Christians who took the book literally, you could make an argument that it's pointless to sit there and try to pick apart the book by going literally, because if none of the followers take it literally, then you're essentially attacking a straw man by taking it literally. But a third of the people in this country do not believe in evolution. Just saying those words makes me sick to my stomach, that a third of the people in this country do not believe in evolution. That is just so mind-bafflingly ignorant that, let's be frank, why don't they believe in evolution? I mean, I'm sure that if there was no religion in the world, there would still, of course, be some people who would say that they don't believe in evolution, just like there's some people who are flat earthers and such. But the simple fact is that if you don't believe in evolution, it's almost always because of your religious views and your religious upbringing. So this is why I think it is more than fair to do a literal analysis of the book. Is it too literal sometimes? Maybe. I mean, if you just want to read it as a book of myths and, general themes, that's fair. That's the way I used to read it before. But even if you want the book to not have to be taken so literally, even if you're a rational, moderate Christian, who doesn't believe that the world was made in 6 days and all this shit, that's fair and good on you. But as I've been reading it for God-Free Bible Study, it is shocking me even to see how much is just internally incoherent or contradictory. And I'm not talking about the big contradictions that people always throw at you, like if you're an atheist trying to, score points against an apologist or something like that. I mean, there are big contradictions that we can talk about, but even little things. Sometimes you're reading a chapter or a verse and it's like that sentence doesn't make sense, or it flat out goes against what was written 5 sentences before. I mean, sometimes just if you're paying attention, sometimes the fuckery is so glaring that it's amazing to me even now. I've been an atheist now for a hot minute, but even now as I read the book, it's incredible how much sticks out to me now. And of course, the act of reading it on camera definitely causes me to analyze it mentally in a more fastidious manner than I ever did before. Because even as an atheist, if you're an atheist, if you sit down on your couch right now and read the Bible, yeah, you might think it's bullshit, but there's a lot of stuff you won't catch because you're just kind of skimming through stuff like, yeah, I know this story or whatever. But when you have to put it on screen, then you really start looking carefully at everything. And the stuff that stands out is so ridiculous and so glaring. I just wonder sometimes how people can't glom on to the obvious problems in the book. But that being said, he says, man, learn how to read and understand books and get a life instead of wasting time criticizing something you don't even believe in. There are all sorts of aspects of life where all of us at times will choose to criticize things that we don't believe in. There are very good reasons for doing that. I don't believe that the earth is flat. And even though I don't focus on this much on my channel, would I criticize a flat earther? Of course I would, because you're a fucking idiot. If it suits the topic of the video, I would absolutely call you out on that. So just because Christians play this card a lot. Greetings, sirs, die. I'm sure I'm screwing that up. Christians play this card a lot. If you're an atheist and you have even if you don't have a YouTube channel, but if you're saying anything critical about their religion, one of the first things I'd like to fall back on is, well, you don't even believe this. Why are you wasting time criticizing it? Because it's a huge fucking influence in our life. in our country, in our political systems, in our social systems. It's a massive part of life. So the idea that I can't criticize Christianity anymore because I'm not in it, or that I'm wasting my time. Now, you might not like my arguments, and even a like-minded skeptical person could watch some of my videos and say, you missed the mark there. Or you might think, oh, you're kind of wasting your time on this particular point. And that's fair. Even amongst people who have similar ideas, it's not unusual that I might look at your similar ideas and say, I think you're approaching that wrong. I think you're spending too much time on this issue. I think you're being too critical. And that's all fair. But it's fine to say that we should critique what I'm talking about, or maybe a certain point that I made or tried to make didn't hit very well. But if you then extend that to this idea that I really just shouldn't be criticizing this because I don't even believe in it anymore, that's just fucking ignorant. I mean, that's just not the way that the world works. I don't have to criticize Christianity. I mean, given that I've created this channel, it's kind of for that purpose. But I could shut the channel off tomorrow, but I would still be confronted with these aspects of Christianity in nearly every day of my life and every day of our world, all of the news and the politics and everything else going on. And even if I weren't talking about Christianity, as I've already mentioned, there are 1,000 different issues out there that I don't believe in, but at any given time, it might be more than appropriate for me to chime in and say, that's a problem. You shouldn't think that way or whatever. Like the evolution thing. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not a creationist, but you still don't believe in evolution, I'm going to critique creationist ideas because they're just factually bankrupt. But anyway, then he polishes that off with, maybe start criticizing your own very smart worldview, which led to some of the worst regimes and genocides in history, Nazis and communists. This gets so tired, and I know it's not going to stop, but the lame and fallacious arguments that are always thrown around for this, the Nazis were not an atheist regime, and as far as Hitler goes, there's at a minimum at least some very good debate about what his true beliefs were. Even if he was an atheist, and that's possible, although even if he was very keen on leveraging religious iconography and religious propaganda to further his cause. So you can say, oh, he's an atheist, he's a bad person, which again is not factually true. We don't really know what his inner beliefs were, and he didn't say very much about his beliefs. But what does it say about your religion that they had on all of their their uniforms and such? In the insignia said "Gott mit uns," which is God with us. God's with us, and that's one example. But there were plenty of other places in Nazi Germany where they absolutely found it expedient to leverage religious dogma and religious iconography to further their cause. And we want to talk about the communists. I mean, first of all, which communists are we talking about? There have been communist states that are horrible and some that are far less. He's probably referring to Stalin, to the Stalinist regime of Russia, or the USSR at the time. And that's fine, but it is beyond reductive to say that all of that stuff happened in Russia because of atheism. I mean, it is true that the communist state or communism in general tends to implement policies that are restrictive of religions, but it is a massive stretch to then take that and say everything bad happening in this communist state is the product of atheism. No, that has nothing to do with it. And there have been genocides, unfortunately, throughout life, throughout world history. But I love how he brings up the worst regimes and genocides without even realizing how ironic that is, that in Joshua, the book of Joshua that we're replying to in this video, it is specifically spelling out the rules and the commandments of genocide, as it also did in Deuteronomy. But in Joshua, they're actually going through with these rules according to the text. So it's really rich for any butthurt Christian to want to throw genocide claims at an atheist. Like, I don't know if you want to go there. You might want to think about that one for just a minute, because even if all of that shit in the Bible is fictional, which they don't want to tell you. But if it's real, that's very problematic. And if it's fictional, those are still commands from your God telling you to commit genocide. So I don't think you have a moral standing at all. I don't think you have a little plot of land to stand with regard to this moral idea. There are no morals in this idea that says, oh, atheism bad because of genocide. It's like you literally don't even understand the context of what you're talking. But he's telling me that I need to learn how to read. Okay, good on you, dude. All right. Back to the Moscato, the finest of wine. What else we got? So this for Aztecas is in the chat with us, and in case for Aztecas is thinking, what the hell? I don't always tear apart the comments. Sometimes I like to highlight some of the comments that I like. So this is not against you, for Aztecas, but I did want to highlight this comment. I thought it was cool. This is also on the Book of Joshua synopsis, and he says, at least he's honest. He lied to them. Jesus lied to us all, saying that we can do all things if we believe in the size of a mustard seed. You can move anything. I've believed 7/8 of my life with all my heart, soul, and mind, more than a mango seed. Mango seeds are big. That's a lot more than a mustard seed. And I wasn't able to move a nation to the sea. I developed religious psychosis in my early life. I think it's cool for me to bring this up on the live stream because this is a public comment, so I don't think I'm doing anything untoward here. I believed I was the chosen to answer God's hidden messages in the Bible. I threw my youth away. I used to fast 3 times a month. Fasting can still be good in moderation, but I know what you're getting at. No water or brush my teeth, full NPO. Brushing the teeth is probably should still be done, but I thought the Holy Spirit will make me wiser and more powerful. I wrote a long 200-page prophecy book. For Aztecas, put in the comments if you're still with us. When you say you wrote a long 200-page prophecy book, I assume this means that you were making prophecies? I have never heard this from someone, but that's very interesting. Hey, Alexander, how you doing? I'd like to see that. That's very. I don't think I've ever heard a Christian, even the 8-up devout ones, that said, yes, I started making prophecies. That's a bold move, Cotton, because once you write stuff down, like this will happen. Although I imagine you probably wrote prophecies in the same way that the prophecies in the Bible are, like probably a lot of vague something may come to pass at some indeterminate point in time, but I'd like to see that. That's interesting. And then he says, well, of course, he says right after this, I threw it in the trash. I assumed you had no copies, but I'd like to see the digital copy on that. Excuse me. I used to not lie, say profanity, not do anything. Profanity is fucking great, man. Don't ever get rid of profanity. Lying, usually you should avoid in most scenarios, but profanity is fucking awesome. Don't lose out on the profanity. I had no friends or go to church because I thought I was holy and better than them. I used to cry 2 hours a day reading the Bible. I tried to heal the sick when I was a nurse. Well, I don't know how to take that statement for Aztecas because I would hope that all nurses try to heal the sick. So I'm reading into that thinking like you were trying to, beyond your nursing duties, you were trying to, lay hands on them or something, or pray over them or what have you. That's what I'm assuming you mean. But I do hope that whether you're religious or not, if you are employed as a nurse, I hope you are always trying to heal the sick. That's not a bad thing. He says, I cried when nothing happened and blamed myself. That sucks. I would pray all night. Now I hate God because he lied so much to us all, or he's real as my unfaithfulness. I now do all the debaucherous stuff. Yes, good on you. And now I'm happy. Which I have to say, I love you for Aztecas, but this just, it's cool that this is your story, it's your truth. So I honor that. But this actually plays into the common trope that you get from apologists, like, oh, atheists just, became atheists because they want to sin. Like this kind of feels like that right there. But I'm not invalidating your experience. If that's, what's making you happy, then do that. But I still remember all the scriptures and stories. I'm haunted by my knowledge, 30 years of studies. I threw away my life to religion. So I wanted to bring this. I mean, the whole comment I think is pretty cool, but there's one part of this that made me say, oh, I want to go through this on the live stream, because it says, I had no friends or go to church because I thought I was holy and better than them. I used to cry 2 hours a day reading the Bible. And this is something that I have noticed, even with the people in my life that are still religious, that if you are very religious, everyone talks about how religion can be, one of the benefits of religion is that it can provide you with a sense of community, right? It provides you with a sense of belonging. You're not just community, but also like, oh, I have to be at church on Sunday and I have to be at Bible study on Wednesday. Like, it almost, depending on how into it you get, you can almost start to create structure for your life out of it. And that's fine. I mean, some people want that or need that. And if they do, that's great. But the flip side of that is that it can alienate you from other people. This was a part of his cool comment that I really wanted to highlight. This idea that he's doing all this very religious stuff, but at the end of it, it kind of alienates him as well, because, I thought it was holy and I was better than them. And also you're kind of separating yourself from them. I mean, Christians will always tell you to be in the world, but not of the world, right? I mean, that is Christian dogma. That's standard Christian dogma. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, because any group that you get into, okay, can become polarizing or isolating if you start to do it to extreme levels. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing. If I just became like super fisherman, I went through a phase like 5-6 years ago where I was fishing all the time. I had a canoe and I had, all this fishing gear and everything. And like every time that I wasn't working, I'd be getting in the boat and fishing, which is good. It's fun. But the flip side is, of course, you're not doing anything else. You're not interacting with other people. I mean, you can fish with other people, but usually like it's me in the boat doing nothing, it's talking to no one, yelling at the fish or whatever. And that can be alienating. And church can absolutely, even though people think of it sometimes as a source of community, but it can also be a source of isolation, depending upon the extent to which you take it. So that's why I wanted to highlight Forrest Teka's really cool comment. There's a lot to unpack in this comment. I appreciate it very much. And we could probably talk for an hour about all the stuff here in Forrest Teka's comment. But thank you for that. Appreciate you, bro. All right, next item. Oh, this is fun. Oh, this is good stuff. Good stuff. So, if you guys, if any of you have not watched the synopsis for the book of Joshua, first of all, why haven't you watched it? Come on, dude. I mean, don't leave the live stream now to go watch it. But if you haven't watched it directly after this live stream, you need to watch it. And I know if you're watching it, I know. So don't tell me you watched it and I know that you didn't watch it, because I'll know. So anyway, I'm assuming you watched it. And one of the points that I bring up that a number of people didn't really appreciate is I brought up the fact that the Israelites, if you remember, I said earlier that some of the things in the Bible, even little things, just don't make a damn bit of sense. And one of the things that I brought up in the Godfrey Bible study episode, and I brought it up again when I did the synopsis of the book of Joshua, was that when they cross the Jordan, they're given very specific instructions that the Ark of the Covenant is to go in front of them, and they're to be following behind the Ark of the Covenant. But then it gives a length, and I forget what the length was, but it's a number of cubits, which is like the length of a forearm, right? And if you do a rough calculation on how many cubits it is, it's not going to be exact, but it basically tells them to follow behind the Ark of the Covenant by a half a mile. If you've ever tried to follow someone into unfamiliar territory, that doesn't make any sense. How are you? I mean, basically you're saying that the people carrying the Ark of the Covenant are essentially your guides, right? Imagine that you go off on some adventure, some journey, some, terrain that you haven't been through before, and your guide is with you. And he says, just follow me. I'm just going to be a half a mile ahead of you. That doesn't make any sense. You're going to lose sight of him, or, he's going to dip behind somewhere. Like you're going to be screwed. I mean, there's no way that they actually followed that advice. Even if we assume that the Israelites actually came out of the wilderness and crossed the Jordan and, then went on to do all their conquests, even if we grant all of that, and even if they had the Ark of the Covenant in front of them, there's no way that they were all staying a half a mile behind it. That's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But that doesn't stop Christians from getting pissed off when you point these things out. So Romans says, point 1, the area mentioned is a flood plain. They crossed the river Jordan opposite of Jericho, which was a flat floodplain for miles and miles. It was made with gold. He's talking about the ark. It would have shined in the desert sun. It would have been lifted on top of the Levites' shoulders. Test would be about as noticeable as a shiny gold-plated car traveling a total distance of about 2 miles to the next stop at only half a mile away in a desert where you can see for miles and miles in every direction because it's a floodplain. The first claim you made is so ridiculous that I'm not even going to watch the rest of the video, which fine. I don't want you to watch any more of the video. But this is just patently stupid. I do understand. So the Jericho, there's hilly terrain on either sides of, not the Jericho, the Jordan. There's hilly terrain on either sides of the Jordan. Where the Jordan flows, where the Jordan River flows, yes, it's a valley essentially. So it is relatively flat. But I'm sorry, the logic is just not logicking. You need to learn to logic better, because a half a mile is still a significant distance. I do understand that you can sometimes see a half mile away. And to the point this person is trying to make, if you have something shiny in the desert, yes, it is possible to see something 1 or 2 or 3 miles away. Sometimes you can see like a shiny object on the top of a mountain, even if it's 10 miles away or 15 miles away, if the sun is hitting it just right. But this assumes a lot of things. It assumes that, first of all, that the sun is hitting the ark just right so that you can see this. It also assumes that this floodplain is so flat that there is no time whatsoever when it ever goes over a hill. Because even if there aren't any trees, and there are, if you look at the Jordan River, I could pull it up, but I won't bother. If you look at the terrain, where the Jordan itself is, it has a whole bunch of trees around it because water, right? As soon as you get past the tree line, it probably goes 10 or 20 meters away from the banks of the Jordan River. Yes, then it gets very deserty. But it's not like the salt flats of Utah, all right? There's still terrain. There's still, elevations, and there's still stupid and illogical to think that you're going to take your army of people who are going to commit this conquest and tell them, stay a half a mile behind the guide. That just doesn't logic, and you need to do better. I mean, if you're going to pull this shit out, you need to do better. So he even, Romans tries to, this is where it gets really funny. And I pointed this out. I said, you have no idea what the terrain around the Jordan actually looks like. It's not a flat plain. There are trees, there are valleys that curve, meaning you can't see endlessly in front of you, but that doesn't matter, does it? So then he puts this link here, thinking that he's making a great point. And the link is, well, this is focused on Jericho, but we can, that's Jericho. This here is the Jordan River. I think you guys can see that on screen. This wobbly line here is the Jordan River. And you can see that there's hilly terrain on this side. There's very hilly terrain or even low-lying mountains on this side. And then this flat plain he's talking about is basically this area all around here. But it's not a flat plain. I mean, just look at the contours on here. It's flatter, but the idea that you could just faithfully follow someone who will not let you get any closer than a half mile to them is just stupid. And I need you to logic better. That's the only way you can say it, because this doesn't make any sense. And then he just doubles down. He says, if you take into account the climate an ecosystem that has changed over 3,000 of years. Look at the spot on the map. None of these man-planted grass and trees or man-built modern-day houses and roads would have been there. It would have just been a sandy, true, it is a plain, which I try not to make fun of, like, you know, grammar and such, but if you're gonna try to tear someone apart, at least learn to fucking build a sentence, man. I mean, dude, have Chat GPT make the sentence for you or something if you can't. But okay, if you look at the topography, it is flat. There's no mountains. You can almost see from Jericho to Ain al-Sultan when you stand on a rooftop. But I love this. He says none of these man-planted grass or trees were there. So in other words, he's basically saying that there wouldn't have been a single bit of foliage anywhere here. Now, granted, this is desert-like territory, or desert-like territory. I don't know exactly how much precipitation they get per year, but it's not much, right? So you're not going to have like forest. But if you've ever seen these areas, there is low-lying scrub. You know, there's bushes. There are different types of flora, and those things would absolutely interrupt your line of sight. So it's funny how much some of the commenters just really got pissed off by this. I guess they just couldn't deal with that. And then this one's even better. This guy makes the previous commenter look really intelligent. So he says, same point. He says, before satellite technology, no armies could see half a mile ahead to know if troops before them were being successful or not. What a moronic analysis. Which I think he's trying to say that if I'm saying that no one could see a half a mile ahead of them, then it's a moronic analysis. But I mean, the way it's written, it sounds like he's basically just making my point. Like, yeah, you couldn't see a half mile ahead. Again, is it possible that given a particular line of sight, depending upon where you're standing and depending upon where I'm standing, is it possible that at times I could see a half mile in front of me? Of course it is, especially in desert terrain. There are times when you can absolutely see a half mile ahead, but you're not going to march a whole fucking army and then just trust that at no point in time will the people leading you a half mile in front of you go out of sight. Because even if they just go over a slight hill, you've lost sight of them. You know how that works. I mean, even it's just a little bit of a hill. By the time they get to the other side of the hill, you've lost sight of them. And then you just have to blindly go in that direction and hope that they haven't changed. So it just doesn't make any sense. And Grumpy says, don't know if it would be near high enough to block a view, but the area does get grass in the spring with support from Mark and John. Yeah, I mean, it's very deserty there. I know that's not really great use of vocabulary, but it's very, very arid there, and there's not a lot of growth. But it's wrong to make it sound like when they were wandering in the wilderness around Sinai, there's like nothing growing out there. That's real desert where, if you look at the area around Sinai and that whole part of that peninsula, there's nothing growing there. But when you get to the Jordan River and you get to Jericho and you get to this area, it's less arid. It's still arid climate, of course, but there is at least more flora, and it is pretty naive to think that, oh, nothing was growing there then, because that just doesn't make sense. So anyway, let's move on to the next one. But first, Moscato time. I like secular scripture. It says, you just want to sin is code for being a normal, healthy human. Amen. Okay, so this is from Heretical Buttermilk. It says, always enjoy your book reviews. They're referring to the synopses that I do of every book. Yet another problem I noticed was the reason God forbid any loot taken from Jericho. All the riches, valuables, gems, jewels, gold, tools, weapons, and such were consecrated to the Lord's treasury. So just leave everything lying amongst the rubble. Why? Was God going to gather it for himself later? I just thought this was a fun point because they're given some really radical instructions at times to like pick up nothing, to take nothing, like they're not supposed to loot. And at other times they're specifically told that they can loot. I don't know what the logic is behind it, but like Heretical Buttermilk says, are we just going to leave it all laying there? Like, I guess we just turn it into a big trash pile or something. Like the practical magic aspect that they have in the Bible around like you can't even touch the things, because it's got like bad god juju on it, like Baal juju or Asherah juju. I know it's the Bible, but still it gets to be a little corny at times. Next comment. Oh, I didn't want to do that one. No, I don't know why I brought that up. Oh, this is one I want to do. Okay. So James Richard Wiley, who comments a lot on the channel, I appreciate his patronage. He says the book of Joshua is best understood as a theologically driven narrative crafted to affirm Israel's divine right to the land, not as a reliable historical record of conquest. And then he quotes here from Google AI. The book of Joshua presents several significant challenges for modern readers, primarily centered on its depiction of violent conquest and divine command of genocide. Many find the narrative disturbing because it describes God ordering the complete annihilation of the Canaanite population, including men, women, children, and livestock. And livestock. Yeah. Why do you have to kill the cows, man? It's so rude. Like, just let the cows live. Let the sheep live. Okay, I guess it poisons the meat or something. Like, if you eat an ox that was owned by someone who worshipped Baal or Asherah, does the Baal worship or the Asherah worship get into your system because it was in the ox meat? Like, how does that work? It doesn't make any sense. And it says, which modern ethics and understanding of justice often label as ethnic cleansing or genocide. This raises theological and moral questions, especially when contrasted with the message of love and mercy and the teachings of Jesus. But I just wanted to highlight this comment from him because I think one of the saddest things about Christianity today is that as much as I give Christian shit and I give the Bible shit because it deserves it, there's interesting stuff to pull from the Bible. I mean, on some level, it can be a fascinating book if you don't insist on imposing this ridiculous framework of literalism over the top of it. It's not just about fidelity to God. It's about you actually want to understand what the stories at least are trying to tell you. And sometimes if you stop trying to stamp this mold of literalism onto it, you'll find that the story itself is far richer and far more engaging. I'm not going to tell you that it's great literature. I'm not going to tell you that it's a great moral compass, but I am going to tell you that if there is the best insights that you can gain from the Bible and from that time through reading the Bible and about the people who wrote the Bible is not by taking it literally. It's by reading it like any other textual critic would do. Meaning, yes, you're taking the words, but then you're also thinking about the context. You're thinking about what was going on in the region at the time. You're thinking about different styles from different writers and why we see contrasting styles. I mean, there's like in the perfect example of this that I think Christians just miss out on badly is the New Testament. We have 4 Gospels. One thing I never hear a Christian ask is, why do we have 4 Gospels? Why do we have one gospel? And you can say, well, it's 4 different views. But I mean, if this is divinely inspired, couldn't God have just sat one person down and said, here's the story of Jesus, write this down? Like you'd think they could do that. But no, we have 4 Gospels. And I'm not even going to bore you with stories about contradictions or whatever. But even if you don't get down that rabbit hole of do they contradict each other, to me, the more fascinating story is to look at the different ways, because all 4 Gospels say something different. I don't just mean that they have different words or that they, some Gospels tell you this anecdote about Christ and but it's not in the other Gospel. I don't mean that. I mean that if you take your Christian hat off for a second and you actually pay careful attention to like the differences between Mark and Matthew and Luke and John, you can start to see a very clear pattern about what each author at that time, or authors, were trying to imprint upon the religion, or what they were trying, how they were trying to steer the religion. So, for example, I talked earlier about Matthew 5:17, right? To me, the best critique against Matthew 5:17, because my argument is like, hey, it says you have to follow all the laws. This is Jesus. These words are put into the mouth of Jesus. So if we took it literally, I don't know how you get around this whole story that you don't have to follow the old laws anymore. It just doesn't make any sense, and it makes you a hypocrite. But the more reasonable answer to it is to say, look, Matthew's a nice book, but it was also written by a known Judaizer. In other words, it was written by someone who clearly wanted to impart upon the readers that Jewish law does not go away, and that you still need to follow all these things, and you still need to, honor a lot of the Jewish customs. And even if you're going to be Christian, that is a clear voice that comes out of Matthew. And now contrast that with like John. John is has the most high Christology to it. It's also the one where a lot of the anti-Jewish rhetoric comes from. It paints Jewish people in general in a very unflattering tone. How do you square those? Well, you square them by realizing that there were two different authors. They were written at two different times, and both of those authors were essentially trying to put their stamp on the religion, and they're trying to steer the religion by putting words in the mouth of Jesus. And I know Christians don't want to hear that, but this is just what it is. Different people had different directions they wanted the religion to go in. And if they just stood on a hill and said, I think the religion should do this, that doesn't get it done, because now you have all the other people fighting against you with their doctrine and their dogma. But if you write a gospel, and in the gospel, Jesus said you have to do this, now suddenly your views have divine authority. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there, but I wanted to just bring this up about Joshua, because there's so much about Joshua and Judges and all this that is far more interesting if you understand it as, like James Richard Wiley is saying, like Joshua to me very clearly comes across as being like this manifesto that says this land is ours. The stories in it are kind of jacked up. They're inconsistent. Shocker, it's the Bible. But if you step back from it, it really reads like a people trying to say, look, this is our land, and we can prove it by looking at our own book. Now, granted, if you're fighting with them for the land, you're not going to care what's in their book, right? But it's them trying to make a case. It's them trying to put their stamp down and say, this is our land, and this is why, because it's our history, and look at all the people we conquered, and look at all the places we went through, and look at all the boundaries that we laid out. It's like them really trying to make a historical case. Moving on. Once again, I will mention for anyone who came late, today's sponsor, who doesn't pay me, but I'm calling him the sponsor anyway, is the fine wine tastes of Sutter Home Moscato. You know that you're going to have a good night when you've gone all in on the 1.5 liter of Sutter Home Moscato. This is classy shit right here. I mean, it just doesn't get much better than that. I know I have a lot of people from overseas, so if you're not familiar with this brand, it's because it's that classy. It's very, very classy stuff. When you come to someone's house and they serve you Sutter Home Moscato, ooh, that's highfalutin right there. Yes, JK, it's proof of the multiverse. I love that. Okay. And I think you guys know this already, but I will mention anyway that I'm going to keep going through the comments. But if you guys want me to shut up and want me to talk about something else, you need to let me know in the chat, because otherwise I'm just going to keep plowing on. It's my damn show. I will just keep plowing on as long as I want to. No, seriously, I will change direction if you want to talk about something else. But unless someone speaks up, we're going to go right to the comments. The live action role play of God's Troll Army. So this is again on the Joshua synopsis. Roop J says, my understanding of the archaeological evidence is that the Hebrew people settled at least mostly peacefully among the pre-existing tribes in the area. And then Bria replied to that saying, genetic analysis, I believe, shows them to be the same as Canaanites. There are many academics who hold that Israelites changed religious beliefs, tribal, other, and whatnot. For that matter, there were multiple strains of Yahwism as well at the time. So yes, they don't want to admit this, especially Christians, but Israelites are Canaanites. It's the same fucking people. I mean, you know, at some point they had their tribe and called themselves Israelites, and the other tribe was called the Canaanites, but it's not like we're talking about Japanese people and South African people. You know, like it's not, we're not talking about people that are genetically distinct. We're not talking about people that have radically different cultures. We're just talking about a clash of minor cultural ideas and religion. But I wanted to highlight this as well because I didn't talk about this in Godfrey Bible Study because it's a tangent. And I also didn't talk about it there because I am not a historian. You know, I can't speak knowledge. I can't speak with any authority on this, but I will just tell you anecdotally here on my live stream that I have seen, you know, a lot of commentary, not only questioning the authenticity of books like Joshua, but also a lot of the commentary or a lot of the things that I've seen from historians even questions whether there was how much conquesting was really going on. I would find it hard to believe that there weren't some battles going on. I'm sure at some point the Israelites said, we're going to take that city, and they did, or they failed or whatever. But it's not a fringe idea, at least among non-Christians. It's not a fringe idea to success, what's the word I'm looking for? Brain's not working. It's that Moscato. It's that damn Moscato. Oh my gosh, the Moscato's poisoned my brain. It's not a fringe idea to suggest, that was the word that just would not come, to suggest that not only that a lot of these conquests may not have happened, but that the Israelite people were truly just coexisting with the Canaanites for long, long periods of time. And I'm not saying that there were never tensions, but from what I understand, and anyone, Christian or not, could probably take me to task on this because, again, I don't have deep knowledge on this, and nor do I pretend to. But my anecdotal understanding of it is that there's reasonable evidence that, you know, not a lot of these conquests actually happened, and a lot of this taking over the Israelites was at most a cultural takeover, you know, probably much more of a cultural, assuming it even happened, but it was probably much more of a cultural takeover than it was this blood and guts rampaging through the countryside, burning and pillaging kind of thing. But when you then go back afterwards and write your own history, you know how that works, right? I mean, you know, look at a U.S. history book from a U.S. publisher, and look at a U.S. history book from a publisher in Japan, and they're going to read very differently, aren't they? They're going to have different narratives and different things that they highlight because there's this little bias involved there. So these are Israelites. Yes, it's their religious book, but they're essentially writing their history, and they're probably writing these stories about things that supposedly happened even at the time of writing. They were probably, you know, long before. So of course it's going to be massive conquest, and we kicked everyone's ass, and we owned the whole place, and we brought everyone to bear and made them bow before us, and everyone's chronicles written that way. They all write their own chronicles. It's rare that any people ever writes their own history and says, yeah, we got our ass kicked. That was a bad move. We shouldn't have done that. Like, they've always got some way to spin it that makes them sound like the heroes. It's called ethnocentricity. It's a very common worldwide phenomenon. My ex she was majoring in anthropology, and she said that, I don't know how this is true. You guys can call me out on this if you think that this is just me hearing this from my ex decades ago. But she said that there are only two things that are consistent amongst all civilizations throughout time that we know of. One is a ban on incest, And now, by ban, to be clear, I'm not saying we know that like a lot of times people are marrying their cousins and such, right? Especially like in olden times. But ban on incest, like you don't do stuff with your kids, and you don't do stuff with your sister. I mean, hardcore incest. A ban on incest and an ethnocentric view. And she said that's it. Everything else that you think is universal, you can find some society now or in other periods of history that didn't have a problem with it. Even down to things like pederasty and such. I mean, there unfortunately have been societies where it wasn't that big of a deal, or where they didn't punish it outright or whatever. But the only two things that my ex said were consistent between all societies throughout time that we know of are an ethnocentric view, and which is kind of human nature, and a soft ban, at least on incest. I say soft ban because, again, cousins, that's usually not a big deal in olden societies. I want to see it. Grumpy says, yeah, so this is a good point. So Grumpy's pointing out that in 2 Kings, which we haven't gotten to, of course, in Godfrey Bible Study, but there is a fascinating story in there. I can't wait till we actually get to it on Godfrey Bible Study, because in that story, the Moabite king sacrifices his son to Chemosh. And if you were to believe the text, he doesn't just sacrifice it. Like, the Israelites are coming. The Israelites, I think the intonation is that the Israelites were favored, okay? They were favored to win. I think they had more people, or they had kicked a bunch of ass. Like, they were going to come and they were going to take this place. So the Moabite king takes his son on the city walls, like the gates around the city, and sacrifices him. I think it was like it's been a while since I read it, but of course we'll read it here in a little bit when we get to it. But he sacrifices him. And after he sacrifices him, the Israelites lose. Now, it doesn't say, of course, they lost because the Moabite king sacrificed his son to Chemosh. But it lays it out as this sequence, like, Moabite king sacrifices son to Chemosh, Moabites win. And it's hard to read it any other way than for what it really is, which is like, wow, it sounds like the sacrifice to Chemosh, as disgusting as that is in principle, worked. Not only does it sound like the sacrifice to Chemosh worked, but it also makes Yahweh sound like a little bitch, because apparently he wasn't powerful enough in his own right to overcome the magic juju of the Moabite king sacrificing his son to Chemosh. Maybe Chemosh is just a bigger, badder god. I don't, read it however you want. But again, it's not explicit. It doesn't say this is why they lost. But it's pretty hard to read it in good faith in a way that takes it any other way. Moving on. I just brought this up as a housekeeping thing. It's like, well, I'm just going to bring this up here. I say like every 2 or 3 weeks, I get a comment on one of my videos. It'll say something like this. You see it says, I really enjoy your content, but could you check your audio settings? When listening to your channel, I get a ringing in my ears that I don't get from other channels, so it's not just my old ears. Do you guys ever hear this in my videos? Put a comment or something, or comment on future videos or something, because I don't get these comments a lot, but I get them, like I said, once every 3 weeks or someone will put one of these comments on my videos, and I will go back and replay the video. I have it going through my speakers and everything, and it always sounds fine. Now, sometimes my audio quality isn't what it could be, depending on if I didn't set my mic up right or something like that, but they're not really talking about the general quality of my audio. They're making it sound like there's like these audio artifacts. So I'm not going to linger on that, because you guys didn't tune in to hear me talk shop about the mechanics of my channel. But I just wanted to bring this up here in the live chat. Like, has anyone else noticed this? Because if it was only one time that I got this comment, I'd say they just got a jacked up system. But every 3 or 4 weeks, I get another random person saying something like this, and I don't hear it. I don't know if it's just, I'm old. I don't hear that well. Maybe there's all kinds of audio crap in my feed. I don't know, but I don't hear it. one of the benefits of getting old is that you don't care about audio quality anymore because you just don't hear that well. And I don't need the high def TV anymore because I can't see that well, so it's all going to be blurry. So it's kind of one of the weird benefits of getting old. You no longer have to pay for the hi-fi system and the great visual and audio quality because it's just going to be wasted on you anyway. For that matter, I could just get like the old 1950s little box TV. Okay, so this one comes from Positivity. I don't think Positivity, did Positivity join us? No, I haven't seen Positivity in the chat, but Positivity is often with us. And I just thought this was interesting because it's once again the comment about what you can see and not see in the desert. And this is really pissing Christians off, right? Positivity says, I used to guide expeditions in the Sonoran Desert. If you guys don't know, that's southern Arizona and northwest Mexico. Looking like a lot of your videos, background imagery. I would not even want to think about the poor survival rate if I told my group that I would be leading them by a half a mile. Incredibly stupid in real life. But I guess make-believers could just posit a non-muggle solution on this. But don't tell the angry Christians that have posted on this video because they're telling me how stupid I was to imply. I mean, imagine that. Imagine even if the desert is flat, even if you got long sight lines, just to say, okay, I'm going to be leading you guys, but make sure you stay half a mile behind me. And keep in mind, the reason that they were told to stay a half a mile behind the ark is essentially because it's like this theological bomb. It's like the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like it's supposed to have the power to kill you. And I mean, telling them to stay half a mile behind it was, as I understood it when I was reading it, was like a safety measure. Don't let them get too close to the ark. Which, okay, but can't God control that? I understand he doesn't want them all up on the Ark of the Covenant, touching it or feeling. Fine. Okay. Give it a wide berth. It's a holy thing. Plus, keep in mind that I think we lose sight of this sometimes when we read these texts, because to a modern ear, it just sounds like the Ark of the Covenant. It just sounds like a gold statue or something, right? Like it's a religious icon, but it doesn't. I don't think it has the same feeling to us. I think you have to always remember that in the Israelite or Jewish way of thinking back then, this was like God was in it. It wasn't just a fancy relic that he told you to make. It's like God, that was God. I mean, God was in the ark, but like God dwelled in it. Like I don't know how that works, but I don't know why God needs to dwell, but I mean, that's what they were thinking. So I bring this up because I do understand telling, if you buy into the theology, if you say God's in there and if we get too close, we'll fry or something, which you think God could control, but okay, whatever. But then, why does it have to be a half mile? It's like God can't tamp it down a little bit and say, just stay, 20 feet back. Okay. Just don't be all up in my business because I need a little space here. But the almighty, omnipotent God, and to be fair, they didn't see him in a Platonic sense back then or a Neoplatonic sense. They saw him as corporeal and as anthropomorphic. Although that doesn't make sense because did he have to shrink down to get into the ark? I mean, the ark wasn't big enough for a dude to stand inside. Maybe there was maybe Yahweh was tiny. Maybe like if you saw Yahweh back then, he's like this tall. And he's hanging out in the Ark of the Covenant. He's like, hey guys. Okay, anyway, moving on. So this was in response to the video that I did about Glenn Scrivener and Dan McClellan and Mr. Silly. That's a great name. Mr. Silly. Surreal to be living in a year when apologists urge their followers to learn some logic. Back in the day, they'd warned their fans to avert their gaze from man's logic and focus on God's logic. But apparently they noticed they were losing and figured, what the H? We know we're right, so logic must be in our favor, right? Everybody learn logic now. We're taking the fight to the enemy's face. So, full marks for trying to make an honest fight of this. But apparently apologists are not yet aware how bad their sophisticated new arguments sound to people who understand logic. I'm very less than impressed myself. It's a brave wish when they encourage their people to assess argument. I wanted to highlight this. Thou shalt not make graven images, they block my view. That's great. I wanted to highlight this comment because this actually felt like it was rhyming with a video that I saw recently from CJ Cornthwaite. And I even thought about like maybe doing a reaction to it or something, but I didn't think I had enough unique to say on it to do my own reaction to it. But I'll show the thumbnail to you guys. So if you wanted to pull it up, you could. This video from him, it says on the thumbnail, "Their fatal mistake," and the title is "Modern Evangelists Preach a Secular Gospel," and it's deconverting people. So this commenter here is kind of course, in a smaller, more concise space, essentially making the same argument that C.J. Cornthwaite was making here, which is that it is interesting. I don't know if it's bad or good, but it's interesting because, yes, when I was younger, there were always people who tried to prove the Bible. It's not like that's a new thing, but I do feel like there was this much stronger current, especially amongst evangelicals previously, that said they didn't try to explain it. In fact, they would almost talk down to you if you tried to explain it. They would say that it's a problem with your faith if you tried to explain it. Like, why are you trying to explain it? Like they would embrace the wonder, the magic of it, which again, we can call that good or bad. I mean, I could make an argument either way, but they would really camp in the magic and wonder side, and they would really sometimes overtly try to push against any idea that you would go down this road of trying to prove things, trying to prove the resurrection, trying to prove that the walls of Jericho actually came down, trying to prove all this stuff. And it's in my humble opinion, I think it's a trend that's played out over decades. So it's hard to track because it's not like one year they suddenly changed their tune. But now when you hear sermons from, evangelicals, or when you watch, YouTube stuff about Christianity, it feels like so much more of it is trying to play in this logic arena, like trying to prove stuff, whether it's proving it with empirical evidence or whether it's proving it with philosophical syllogisms. And I think if you actually want to be a Christian, if you want to believe, which I did at one time, I think it actually takes away from it. I used to tell people at the time, I remember like in the 90s, every year or two, you'd hear another story about, oh, we think we found something in the Middle East that somehow connects to a Bible story. And I always used to tell people then when I was a Christian, I told them, you're missing the point. You're missing the whole fucking point. The point is not to see if you can verify every one of these stories from the Bible. I mean, first of all, you can't, but even if you could, that's not the point of the Bible. But I like this comment, and if you guys, feel like it, check out CJ Cornthwaite's video here as well, because I think it makes a very cogent argument that, how is it now that we're in this arena where apologists are trying to go toe-to-toe with you on empirical evidence, or trying to go toe-to-toe with you on philosophical syllogisms. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be allowed to do that, but I think that whether they realize it or not, it often waters down their own message. Moving on up to the next comment. To a deluxe apartment in the sky. I'm dating myself, I know. Okay, this is from Ziploc, a frequent commenter on the channel. It says, this is replying to the Joshua synopsis. This is why I don't accept Christians as automatically or even good people. If you think children are responsible for the crimes or sins of their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, there's something wrong with you. And that's the whole message of the Bible. Some mythical ancestor thousands of generations ago did a bad thing, even if they didn't know it was bad at the time. And it was only bad because God decided it was. And somehow I'm responsible. Give me a break. I, of course, like this comment. Grumpy says, as much as I like Cornthwaite, I did post my largely opposing opinion on that video. Interesting. I'll have to, I'd like to see what your comment was there, Grumpy. I'm not asking you to put it here in the chat, but I'll check that out. And like I said, without going down that rabbit hole, when I was watching the video, I was like, I could argue this either way, but I'd like to see what you wrote on his video. I'll look that up. But to this point here of the comment from Ziploc, I wanted to highlight this because for most of my life, there have been a significant number of people around me at work, in my family, etc., who just had this baked-in assumption that if you are Christian, you are a better person. And I hope you guys know by now that I try not to be that guy who says you're Christian, therefore you are bad. That to me is going way too far. But I also long ago disavowed myself of the delusion that merely being Christian makes you a better person. Like one area where this always frustrates me, and I felt this way even before I was an atheist, to run for any reasonably sized office in the US. And by reason, I don't mean like a small city council office or whatever. I mean president, senator, representative, governor, state senator, state representative, those kind of bigger offices where you have many thousands of constituents voting for you or against you. You pretty much cannot get elected to anything if you don't at least give lip service to the idea that you're Christian. Now, these people won't, generally speaking, they're not going to follow you on Sunday and make sure that you go to church. But if you come out, and I don't know if this is true of other countries or not. If you guys know differently, I'd love to see your comments. But in America, if you're running for a major office and you come out and say, I'm an atheist, you just kiss the whole fucking election away. Now, you could be a complete hypocrite like Trump. I don't think there's a Christian bone in his body. I don't think he knows anything about the entire damn religion, but he's not going to tell anyone that. He's going to say the lamest, vaguest lies that he can. There's that great video, I wish I had it queued up, where it was from a few years ago, and the reporter is asking Trump, like, what's his favorite verse? And Trump clearly doesn't know a single verse in the entire Bible. Not that that makes you a good or bad person, but clearly he did. I don't think he's ever cracked the spine on a Bible. And the way that he just, weasels around without answering the question, it's just obvious that the dude doesn't. And I'm not claiming that you have to read the Bible to be a good Christian, but usually if you're a devout Christian, you're going to have read some of the Bible at least. But you can't get elected in this country to a major office if you are openly atheist. You could basically be non-religious, but still say to everyone, I'm a Baptist, or I'm a Lutheran or whatever. That's usually good enough just to say that you are. But because there's this baked-in assumption that still persists throughout this country that somehow the mere fact that you believe in a specific fairy tale somehow makes you a better person. And again, I'm not trying to go over the top on this. I'm not trying to say, it's the opposite, like, if you're Christian, you're bad. But I can give you, having been a Christian for 40 years and having been an atheist now for 12, I cannot give you one tangible reason why faith or lack of faith alone should in and of itself be any type of indicator about the quality or lack thereof of your personality or your moral character. I've seen Christians who are horrible people. I've seen atheists who are wonderful people. Of course, I've seen Christians who are great people. I've seen atheists who are horrible people. I've seen people of other religions who are great and bad. It's all over the board. But this baked-in assumption that we have in this country, and I don't know how much this goes to other countries. I think this is really common in Latin American countries too. But I don't have any evidence to give you. I'm just like spitting stuff off the top of my head. But this baked-in assumption that you were somehow just better, if you're Christian, and we can't trust you if you don't say that you're Christian. I mean, the funny part there is, if I'm running for office and I tell you that I'm an atheist, people will rate me low for how much they think they can trust me. Of course, they will trust me more if I lie to them and tell them I'm a Christian. It's like you can actually get a higher trust rating from your constituents if you lie to them. I guess that's not surprising. I mean, I guess I should say, that's life, but it's kind of a sad statement. But moving on to the next comment. This is from Secular Scripture. Don't know if you're still you're still there. At least you were recently. I wanted to highlight this because, I had pointed out in the book of Joshua that once again, the story's so stupid. They march around the city, the walled city for 7 days. They just march around it with the ark. And the people in Jericho, if we're assuming that this is, a real walled city with military people and such, they just watch them march around. Like because once the Israelites get there, you're under siege, essentially. Okay. If you're under siege and then your enemy just starts parading around the walls with their holiest of holy relics in front of them, I'm getting archers. I'm going to at least take some pot shots. I'm going to try to take a few of them out. And secular scriptures cogently points out, they say slingstones would have been highly effective too if Jericho hadn't been totally abandoned or nearly abandoned by the time the Israelites emerged as a people group in the 1200s or supposedly showed up in the 1400s. It's estimated that there were fewer than 200 people living in the ruins of Jericho when Joshua supposedly showed up. The walls had fallen 150 to 200 years before that. This is another one of those things where I thought it was good to highlight this comment because I've heard this before and I believe it. It makes total sense. I didn't mention it when I was reading through Godfrey Bible Study because it's kind of tangential, but also, I would have had to have done more research to feel confident talking about it on camera. Because even though I've heard this, and I believe this is probably true, that Jericho fell long before the Israelites got there, I don't like to go off on things too much unless I feel at least moderately able to speak to it. But this is absolutely a thing. If you go Google, when was Jericho occupied and when did the walls come down and everything, it is not even that controversial amongst, historians and I want to say not architects, archaeologists, that the walls, even that when they did fall, because there is evidence there that there was something happened that walls did come down. I mean, so that part, like, Christians were like, haha, but then when you look at the dating, it doesn't work. It's like the walls were already destroyed at the time that we're supposed to believe that the Israelites got there. And that's a whole rabbit hole. I'm not going to go into it in depth here because, again, I'm not properly acquainted with the subject to speak about it confidently on camera, but absolutely look it up because it's fascinating. And of course, like everything else, the Christians will swear, no, you got your dates wrong. No, this absolutely, oh, stupid skeptics. They don't want to admit that the book is right. Yeah. The whole world is a conspiracy put together for the sole purpose of discrediting Christians and their holy text. There's a cabal, the atheists and the Muslims, like, we're all sitting around like, how do we discredit the Christians today? They're making up fake evolution evidence. They're creating their own handmade fossils and sticking them in strata and then going out later and excavating them. I mean, the biggest conspiracy in the world, according to many Christians, is the conspiracy to discredit Christians. But okay. Next. Oh, this is fun. This is a bit of a preview too. Don't you guys love watching me drink? I normally don't have an audience to watch me drink. And I did a lot of drinking last night too. Did a lot of poker playing too. It was quite the evening. Okay. Onward. Upward and onward. Well, I don't know about upward. We'll just say onward. Let's not set the expectations too high. So this is a bit of a preview because I have an entire video that's coming out Friday. Yes, Friday. It's for members. You guys can see it now, but it'll be publicly released on Friday. Going through this comment right here, and I'm not going to go through it all in detail because I'm not trying to steal the thunder of my Friday video, but I'm just going to, in this forum, highlight the fact that please enter a name not only thinks that, I'm this stupid atheist who doesn't understand the logics, but they think that you can actually debunk theism merely by citing the problem of evil. Now, you might think, I'm an atheist. You might think, oh, well, wouldn't I be interested in arguments that debunk God or debunk Christianity or whatever? And sure, I would be interested in them, but I'll tell you what, there's the only thing I hate more than a poorly formed argument against my position is a poorly formed argument in favor of my position. You can do more damage to your own causes with a poorly formed argument, even if it's right on some level, than 1,000 other people from the other side attacking you. Because the more talented and intellectual interlocutors that you might come into contact with will quickly understand the weak points of your shitty ass arguments, and they will make hay with it. They will point it out. They will, do some reaction video where they make you look like the idiot that you are, or they'll just make you look like an idiot in a live conversation or debate or whatever. I mean, the point is, don't cling to shitty arguments. So even though you might think that I'm all about like the problem of evil, which I like to call the problem of suffering, and I into the video I discuss why I think the problem of suffering is a much more cogent way to frame this issue. The problem of suffering is a real theological problem. It is something that I think all theists of any stripe have to at least consider or contend with. I mean, these are the big questions of life, right? Why do bad things happen to good people, right? So those are real issues, and they are things that come up to real believers all the time. So they do have to be addressed. But to just say that the problem of suffering debunks God, or he actually claims that it proves that God does not exist. It's like, dude, you are so far from cogent thought. I mean, you can't even get there with a long distance call. He's that far. He's floating in space trying to find his last cogent thought. Because again, we can talk about the problem of suffering all day, and there are legitimate issues, whether you're a Christian or an atheist or whatever, and there are real theological problems that stem from the problem of suffering. But you just make yourself sound like a fucking idiot when you want to come out with this braying jackass shit saying, yeah, this disproves God. You stupid atheist. You don't even know how to disprove God. This all stemmed from me saying in this video, because he's reacting to or commenting on the video that I did about Alex O'Connor and Joe Schmidt, where they were talking about atheist slogans that are bad or shouldn't be used. And in that video, like I've said in many other videos, I said part of the problem of, some of these arguments is that the Christian, or I'm not even going to say Christian in this regard, the theist position is built on an unfalsifiable construct. So anytime you're dealing with the unfalsifiable construct, you can spin your wheels and waste so much time trying to wrap your head into knots, figuring out how you can prove or disprove someone's God. And if you just realize it's an unfalsifiable construct. So either we move on to whatever the next issue is to discuss, and there are many more issues to discuss in theology beside does God exist? I mean, that's obviously an important question, but it's really just one of many. But before we can do that, why waste our time on the unfalsifiable constructs? Let's talk about something that's productive. Let's talk about something where we can learn something from each other, or we can improve society, or improve your religion, or improve the way that it reacts or interacts with our world. Any of that stuff is more fruitful than trying to disprove an unfalsifiable construct. You're wasting your time. Now, I don't get dragged into like debates, and I think I like to think I'm kind of the opposite of a debate me bro kind of person, despite this channel. But I don't think I'm constantly like trying to debate people back and forth. But that being said, if you said no, I want to hear your best case for why God doesn't exist, my response would be, give me a falsifiable construct. And it doesn't have to be the construct of God entirely, but give me one aspect of God that's falsifiable. Just give me anything that I can actually reasonably be expected to argue pro or con. Because if your proposition is unfalsifiable, you are at best wasting my time, and at worst you're trying to set me up for some kind of gotcha moment. Like when I can't disprove your unfalsifiable construct, then you want to say, haha, see that, stupid atheist, you can't disprove God. I know, it's because you created an unfalsifiable construct. So of course I can't disprove your magic sky daddy, who you will not put any disprovable or falsifiable constructs around. It's a fool's errand. But anyway, I'm not trying to steal a thunder from that video. That will be coming out on Friday. It will look like, I mean, I'm sure you guys will see it in your feed. I'm sure you guys wake up every morning and the first thing you do is check my channel, right? You know, you do that, right? Probably have an alarm, because the videos usually come out at 7 a.m. Central. So if you set your alarm for like 7:05, you'll see all the new videos. I'm sure you do that every morning. Like, ooh, is there something new? Because I'm sure that no one has anything better to do with their life. But this is the one here. This is what the thumbnail looks like, and then this is the one coming out Monday. So anyway, we'll move on. Grumpy says, this is a whole field with its own terms, such as theodicy. Yes, absolutely. I can decimate their grounding for morality with the problem of suffering, but disproving the God itself requires proving that suffering is not expected. Absolutely. And I go through that in, I think, in extensive detail in this video. So Grumpy, please check out that video on Friday. I think that you will appreciate the thoughts that I'm bringing there, because I think that we're right in line there. And the problem with suffering, as Grumpy points out, I mean, it's a great argument to bring up if you're trying to have a friendly discussion with a Christian. But it's great in that, not that it disproves God, it's great in that it starts to chip away at this whole fantasy of the Neoplatonic ideal for God. Because, you know, the old Hebrews back in 1000 BCE or whatever, they didn't see God as this Neoplatonic ideal. They didn't see him as omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly just, omnibenevolent. I mean, that was a much later ideal that was bolted onto it, not by Hebrews, but by Greeks, or at least, I can't say by Greeks specifically. It was bolted on with massive influence from the Greeks and the Zoroastrians, or Persians, I should say. They were also a huge influence on changing Hebrew ideas of religion, not to be confused with theo-idiocy. That's very true. Thank you, JK. Okay, moving on. Where am I at? Okay. There we go. I'm getting more efficient at this now. So, like, do you feel the gears working here? I had to highlight this comment if for no better reason than the fact that I love the name Queen Boudica. You should never pass up a chain. And I'm not sure if in that spelling, I'm not sure if you would say Boudica, but I've always heard Boudica. Boudica's just fun to say. You should actually say Boudica 3 times every day, no matter what else is happening in your life. Set an alarm, you know, like it's time to say Boudica. It's just fun. Like pantalones. That's another fun one. Like, how do we ever devolve into pants? Pants, that's such a pedestrian term. But pantalones, that's got flair. So don't throw out the great words so that you can say the crappy ones. But Boudica's a good word or a good name. It says, this is the video where I was talking about the idiot who's trying to say that because the ship of Theseus is a thing, apparently Christianity is real and atheism doesn't exist. Like, if you haven't seen that video, he makes some leaps of logic, that's for sure. But Queen Boudica says, this man's entire video shows the common problem with religious commentary. The atheist asks for proof. The Christian gives arguments. The atheist demands evidence. The Christian makes bad analogies. How does any of this talk of ships, cars, bodies, and cells have to do with whether there's a God or not? And yes, Lake Titicaca, that's another one. That should be said 3 times a day too. Boudica Titicaca. I mean, I think you could actually throw out your meds and increase your mental health simply by making a point every day to say Boudica and Titicaca. You should never be too dignified or too old or too mature to get childlike glee from saying Titicaca. I don't care if I'm 99. It will still make me kind of giggle like a little school kid. It's like, you said Titicaca. But to Queen Boudica's comment here, I just wanted to highlight this because we don't have to talk much about it, but the basic issue is just that when you're talking to a theist, if you're having this religious deep dive conversation, there may not be a way to do that productively. But if it's going to be productive, you have to first realize that you're talking two different languages. And sometimes it means that if you want to actually have a productive conversation that's not confrontational, sometimes you might even have to not concede points, but at least concede some of your language. At least try to understand where they're coming from. An example of this is on the Alex O'Connor and Joe Schmidt video. I talk about how, on one hand, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. To me, is not just a perfect kind of slogan, but it's just inherently true. It's obvious to me. It's like self-evident that, of course, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The problem, however, is that when you talk to Christians, they think that their Bible is extraordinary evidence. So you can say all day that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and maybe it makes you feel good because you think I got a real zinger in there, but it doesn't actually help to bridge the communication gap if you were to find yourself in one of those conversations, because their idea of what is evidence at all and what is extraordinary evidence is probably completely out of whack with yours. So, and that's fine. Some of that stuff is never going to get bridged. But if you want to have a productive conversation, you have to have some way to try to bridge that gap rather than just talking past each other. Yeah, Evolution says, only Paul ever says anything about a new covenant. Absolutely. Actually, I could have sworn that Peter said something about that too. But I don't know that. You're probably right. But I could have sworn that Peter said something about new covenant. But I haven't read. I mean, I've been reading the New Testament for some of my videos, but I haven't sat down and read the New Testament from beginning to end in 10 years. Obviously, eventually we'll get to it on Godfrey Bible Study. Kathy, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but says, I don't believe God is unfalsifiable, but verifiable. And then Evolution 1859 says God is easily falsifiable. So I'm not going to dive into that too much here because, again, I've come out with these I'm going to be coming out with these two videos. Well, especially the one on Friday will highlight my argument on this in fairly good detail. But when you say God is easily falsifiable, I don't know what construct you're using there to say falsifiable, because the Christian, now, if there could be other gods that are falsifiable, depending upon what it's claimed is the nature of those gods. But in terms of the modern Neoplatonic Christian ideal of God, that ideal or that construct, as I've always understood it, is unfalsifiable. Because pick any one vector where you want to try to say. Now, again, we can break down all sort of arguments about the nature of God. If you want to tell me that God is omnipotent, we can make strong arguments against that. If we want to take any particular pillar, if you want to say that he's omniscient, if you want to say, all these different aspects of God, I think you can make very strong arguments about, if you are just assuming for the sake of discussion that the God is there, but then if God is there, he can't be omnipotent, or if God is there, he can't be omniscient, or those types of things. But to say that God is easily falsifiable, I don't know what vector you would possibly do with the Neoplatonic ideal. Because even like when you read the Bible, I can tell you all kinds of things in the Bible that don't make any damn bit of sense, and all kinds of things specifically in regard to Yahweh, to what he does, to what he says, in some respects to what he doesn't do. I mean, there are things that are contradictory. There are things that expose him as being a hideous monster in terms of his morality and the way that he deals with his people or other people. So I can tear that apart. The problem is that even though Christians will tell you that this is their holy text, they will also disavow all of the non-Neoplatonic values of Yahweh from the book. They will tell you that doesn't apply anymore. They'll tell you that they will always retreat to the Neoplatonic ideal of omni-everything, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, perfectly just. And I can knock down pretty much every one of those claims. But to say that he doesn't exist at all, well, I mean, you're proving a negative at that point, I guess I would say. Coffee says, when Matt Dillahunty is asked, what evidence would you accept for the existence of God? His response is always to say, I don't know. Progressive revelation excuse. Yeah. Oh, secular scriptures. I mean, just having to read those words on my screen. I love you, but like just progressive revelation. Like anytime I hear that, my skin crawls because it is such a sad dodge. And it's basically like saying, yeah, everything was really jacked up, and it was jacked up by God. But we had to be progressively moved along because nobody could have possibly said, slavery is bad. Genocide is bad. Like that couldn't, I guess the world would have stopped operating if God had done anything in any respect to end genocide or to end slavery. It's okay, secular scriptures. I'll let it pass this time. But I also wanted to mention here because Coffee said, when Matt Dillahunty is asked, what evidence would you accept for the existence of God? His response is always to say, I don't know, which is cool. I would take it a step further, and I didn't make this up myself. I've heard other atheists say this. I would say, going back to the Neoplatonic ideal, your God's omnipotent and omniscient. Your God knows what he'd have to give me to convince me. I don't. So I agree with Matt Dillahunty's response that I don't know. But to me, the more damning part of that response is I don't know, but your God does. What would you accept for the existence of God? I don't know, but Yahweh knows. But Yahweh can't be bothered. that is, problematic if you want to believe in an omnibenevolent God. The omnibenevolent God that can't be bothered to even provide anything that would convince me. And by convince me, I don't mean that you have to give me a 10-hour court case with proof. I mean, whatever, you being Yahweh, whatever it would take to convince me. So make it happen. And modern Christians, this is something I'll bring up because I've recorded the next 2 episodes of Godfrey Bible Study for the Book of Judges. They're not posted yet. Hey, how you doing? Hey, Gene. And I've recorded the next 2 episodes, but they're not posted yet because my wife hasn't edited them yet. But in the Book of Judges, once again, we get another scenario. It's with Gideon, where Gideon basically demands proof from God. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. He demands signs from God. And you know what Yahweh does? He gives him the signs. He gives the proof that Gideon needs in order to believe that this is Yahweh. I mean, this is all according to the story, of course. But my point is, within your holy text, Christians, and this isn't the first time this happens in the Bible. This happened in Genesis. This happened with Jacob. I mean, there are multiple times in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where Yahweh deigns to interact with someone and they don't believe him, or they're not sure, and they demand signs or evidence, and he gives it to them. So in other words, there is an established precedent in your own holy texts that says, yes, you can ask God for evidence. I mean, if you couldn't, then all of that stuff should be wiped out of the Bible, because it's not even just like a one-time thing. Like I said, it happens multiple times. On Mount Sinai, when, the burning bush, he gives Moses these implements, not only to convince Pharaoh, he gives him this thing. If you remember the story, the first thing Moses has to do is go back to the elders of the Hebrews themselves and convince them. So in other words, the implication is that even the Hebrews in Egypt, the elders of the Hebrews, would not have believed that Yahweh was intervening unless they got these signs. And I know I've gone way off on a tangent, but getting back to the, proving existence of God, yeah, give me a sign. And no, I don't know what the sign should be, but you have an omniscient, omnipotent God. He can figure it out. I mean, I don't believe he can because I don't think he's there. But if we are to believe your claims, then he can figure it out. He's got the power. He's got the ability. He can make it happen. So Evolution 1859 says, the claims in the Bible about the characteristics of God are not only not descriptive of the character, but they aren't traits that can exist. They are incoherent ideas. I don't disagree with you, Evolution. You're right. But there's a difference between disproving. So I said before, you can't disprove. But if we were to say that we're purely addressing the Yahweh of the Old Testament, then I think you could make a much stronger case for disproving the Yahweh of the Old Testament. Because the Yahweh of the Old Testament was not a Neoplatonic ideal. He wasn't omniscient and omnipresent and omnipotent and all this other stuff. He wasn't ethereal everywhere at the same time. You know, he walked among people. He was anthropomorphic. He felt the breeze in his hair, and you know, he walked past people. And to your point, Evolution, you're absolutely right that much of his descriptions, his characteristics in the Bible are contradictory or even can't exist. So I would accept someone saying I can disprove the Yahweh of the Old Testament. My argument's the wrong word because we're on the same side, but my contention with that is that, again, that's not the God that modern Christians worship. I mean, it's a contradiction because they'll tell you that this is their God. They'll tell you that the Old Testament is divine and it's from their God. But then when you ask them to describe the God that they're actually worshiping, it doesn't sound anything like what's described in the Bible, especially not in the Old Testament. They have complete cognitive dissonance on this regard. So if you want to tell me that you could disprove the Yahweh of the Old Testament, I'd say, well, it's still a high bar to pass to truly disprove it. But you can absolutely prove that there are aspects of that God that are completely contradictory, possibly even impossible, you know, and then the only retreat is for someone to say, well, that's not the actual way that Yahweh was. But if you want to tell me that under the modern Neoplatonic ideal of God, that you can disprove that ideal, I would say that's just a waste of time. I mean, I'd love to see an argument otherwise, but in order for even for you to give me an argument that would disprove them, first, the modern conception of God would have to be on some level falsifiable. And they've purposely created, under the Neoplatonic ideal, they've created this idea that he's just everywhere. He's invisible, but he's everywhere all at once. And he wants a relationship with you, but he won't ever talk to you. You can't ever demand anything of him. You know, I can't say, well, then I will pray for this. And if it, doesn't happen, then he's not there. Like Christians will tell you that you can't do that. So it's a constant moving of the goalpost. I like cases. I have a personal relationship with God. Neither of us cares if the other exists. I don't know if you call it a personal relationship. It's a personal understanding, a mutual understanding that you have with God. What's Daryl saying here? Daryl says, do what Jesus said you would do. John 14:12 states, very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. Heal the sick, deaf, blind, then I believe. That is a great point because it does very specifically say that other people will be able to perform miracles. There's also the I forget what the verse is, but there's a verse where he's telling his disciples that you will go out and do these things in my name. So clearly miracles, according to the Bible, are not the sole purview of Yahweh or Jesus. But that being said, if you ever want to get someone to show you their miracles, you're either going to get nothing or you're going to get a con job, right? But I agree, the only thing I don't like about it is you said heal the sick, deaf, blind, then I believe. I mean, depends on how we're talking about heal. Because a lot of Christians will be like, we prayed for grandma and she got better. And that's a miracle. No, it's called medicine. And it's called the fact that sometimes people get better. Heck, usually they get better unless they don't and then they die. But, they will, we heal deaf and blind people today without miracles. Not all deaf and blind people, of course. Depends on the nature of their handicap. But for some deafness and for some blindness, we can cure that. So even that, I'd say, okay, it depends on when we're saying heal the sick, deaf, and blind, what are we actually talking about there? But you can go down a whole rabbit hole there. Coffee says, saying, I don't know, but your God does, simply shifts the burden of proof and avoids defining evidence to any specific standard. it also assumes a theology. Well, I mean, I would say this when I'm talking to someone who is a theist, and usually I would know what their theology is. At least in broad strokes, I would know what their theology is. So if I'm talking to a Christian, yeah, I'm absolutely assuming their theology. I was a Christian for 40 years. And there's nothing wrong with shifting the burden of proof when your God is omnipotent. So it's saying that I can't shift the burden of proof to an omnipotent God, again, goes completely against your own holy text, where it is clear in the Bible that many other people have demanded evidence of God and received it. And if I were to do that, I wouldn't get anything. And I would even be told by Christians that that's not the way it works. You can't do it that way. But even going a step further, I mean, yeah, why is it wrong to say your God is omnipotent? Now, if you want to admit to me that you have a God, but he's not omnipotent or omniscient, we'll say he's not omniscient. Okay. And then you can get into rabbit holes here. Like, depends on what you think about free will. Some people think free will exists. Some people don't. If you think that free will is a thing, then it actually, I won't go through I'll get off this thread here. But if you think that free will is a thing, then there's a whole thread there where it basically kind of shows you that you have to have independent thought. If you have independent thought, then it's possible that God doesn't know what would convince you. But a lot of Christians don't want to go there because they don't want to think that God doesn't know something. But they also don't want to contend with the logical permutations of what happens if I truly have free will. Because most Christians that I know believe in free will. And I'm not trying to get into the does free will exist thing. That's the rabbit hole. Ain't gonna do that. Stop it. I'm not going there. But if we assume the normal Christian ideal that free will exists, it's not a Christian ideal, but most Christians that I know believe free will exists. If we assume that, then you can actually make a strong argument that says that then God doesn't know what it would take to convince me, because I can't truly have free will because if I truly have free will, that means I can formulate thoughts in any pattern that even God can't predict. If God can predict it, it's really not free will. But it's a lot of theoretical threads that we're pulling on there. So I'm going to get off of that for a moment. Otherwise, I'm already doing it, but I will start to just, in 5 minutes later, I'll look up, there's 2 viewers and they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. and those 2 are like on the can or something. Otherwise they would have gotten off, so I have to try to keep somewhat cogent, otherwise I'm just find myself like, how did I get here? How did I end up on this logical path? That doesn't make sense. I've caught myself in this live stream a couple times, and I've recovered every time where I'm like, wait, where was I going with that? And I had to think about it, but so far, I don't know if you guys have noticed a few times when I've stumbled on that, but so far I've always been able to figure out, wait, that's what I was trying to say. This is don't try this at home, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is flying with no net, like on the trapeze here. Hey, buddy. What's up, Vampirica Gorist? 6979. I know the numbers are usually random, but sometimes they just feel like they mean something to me. Welcome, Vampirica Gorist. I like that name. Vampirica Gorist. I feel like that should be like a whole cosplay or something, like what are you for Halloween this year? I'm a Vampirica Gorist. Like, I just like that name. That's cool. All right, moving on. Next response. Rolling, rawhide. Okay, I just wanted to bring this up because I get this sentiment sometimes, and I just thought it would be fun to kind of just briefly bring it up in a live stream, because on the thing with Alex O'Connor and Joe Schmidt, this Blake Saris says a bizarre response video. Like, okay, I'll accept that. Why make a respond video if you're not going to actually respond to what they're saying? I don't know. I got this comment from a couple people, and I think where they were coming from is that they saw, and I didn't try to hide it, they saw that I was not showing the full responses from Alex and Joe. on each of these 15 slogans. I did that for practical reasons. The video that Alex O'Connor put out with him and Joe Schmidt was almost 3 hours long. Now, normally when I do a reaction video, the original video is 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, and by the time I add my commentary to it, it'll become like an hour video. And usually I will play almost the entire original video with my comments interjected. In this case, I had to make a choice. I could either just not do the reaction video, which was always an option, or I could have just like done certain points, like maybe I didn't have to do all 15. I could have done the first 5 and left it at that. But even then, it would be tough to do a reaction video to it because they would do this and then sometimes they would talk for 20 minutes afterward. And it's not, doing reaction videos is not a science. And thankfully, it's not the only thing that I do on this channel. But when you're doing a reaction video, you don't want to have your viewer watch 15 consecutive minutes of the original video, because it's like, then I'll just go watch the original damn video. So yes, I absolutely did chop this up, and I said as much, and I put the link to the original video in the description. I guess that rubbed a few people the wrong way, but I don't know if they were just being hyperbolic, but it says, why make a respond video if you're not going to actually respond to what they're saying? After every one of the 15 slogans, I then, in my video, had multiple minutes of their responses. So there was never a case where I pulled up their slogan and then just gave my commentary and then moved on. Every single time I pulled up the slogan, I played some of their commentary, and then I added my own commentary, and then we moved on to the next slogan. Did I cut that up properly? I don't know. You guys can be the judge. Apparently, Blake Saris did not appreciate it. So I guess Blake Saris will not be a regular viewer, but he's not the first one. You can't please everyone, but you know what? You can drink every day. That's what's more important. I can be drunk, or I can make everyone happy. And you know how this is going to go. All right, moving on to the next. Dude, I'm going to sing the Doom song. Doom, 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 doom. Actually, I'm going to skip this one because this is the same guy that I said basically. We're going to skip that one because that's the guy who I'm doing this. This is Friday's video that's coming out Friday. Does suffering disprove God? Is an entirely response to him. So he doesn't deserve any more screen time. This isn't the please enter a name show. It's a Skepticus show, damn it. So I'm not giving him that much screen time. I already made a whole video for him. So he's gotten way more from me than he deserves. So moving on. So this was in reaction to, this is a comment on one of the other live streams. But this person says, maybe God doesn't answer prayer because the God that they believe in has already pre-planned everything from the moment of creation. After all, they love saying it's all part of my God's plan. So it can't change the situations that prayer is addressed because it would alter its plan. And their God is never changing, but it's also petty, capricious, and narcissistic. So it definitely enjoys the groveling that prayers provide for its own amusement. I don't think that this point is brought up nearly enough. And even by me, you think like, I'm skeptic, atheist, you think I would hammer this. I spend a lot of time hammering on prayer because I think it's one of the most toxic traits of Christianity. I think that it preys upon the followers. I think that it actually sometimes causes real emotional pain for those who want to believe and don't know why God isn't answering their prayers. But this point, I don't think it's nearly enough time, because if you think about this, it depends on how you think about omniscience and how some people think like God knows everything going into the future. Not everyone would believe that, but like Calvinists, for example, would absolutely believe that. Calvinists will tell you that they believe in free will, and I don't know how they can say that, because their theology is centered on this idea that it's all known. God knew if you were going to go to hell at the time that you were conceived, or before even, and yet he still allowed you to be born, and knowing damn well that maybe you're going to burn for eternity under their doctrinal ideas. But moving along with that same logic, not every Christian believes this, but if you really believe that God is truly omniscient, he knows everything that is happening everything that ever will happen. And on top of that, he's omnipotent and he has a plan for everything. Then what's the fucking point of praying for anything? Seriously. I mean, do you think, put it this way. I have something I want to ask of God. My puppy's sick and I want God to heal my puppy because I love my puppy. Why do I even have to say the prayer? If God even knew that I was going to say the prayer, and if he was going to answer it, if he was going to heal my puppy, then I don't even need to say the prayer, do I? Like you can twist your mind into all these knots. Like I don't even have to do the thing because God already, as long as God knows that at some point I was planning to do the prayer, but now I don't even have to do the prayer because it's all part of God's plan. I mean, people in Christianity and other religions too, a lot of times when they ascribe this Neoplatonic ideal to God, I don't think they really spend that much time thinking about the follow-on problems that causes. So if you take, like, for example, the God of the Old Testament, the old Yahweh, very much not Neoplatonic, very much anthropomorphic and such. As problematic and as clunky as that God is, I think that at least it's a coherent model. I mean, I don't believe in gods, but if I did believe there is a God, I could believe that, well, he's in Spain right now. He doesn't know what I'm doing because he's not here, or he only hears what, if he's in the room with me. I mean, that makes coherent, logical sense. When you, hey, Dale, how's it going? Dale's like super member because not only is he a member, but also he's always watching my videos on my other channel, Time Skimmer. So you are a super dude. But to the idea of the Neoplatonic ideal, when Christianity or Judaism, I should say, started in the Old Testament, they didn't have Neoplatonic ideals for God. They thought that he was, they wouldn't say it this way, but they actually thought that he was limited, that there were things he couldn't do, places he couldn't be everywhere at once. Whereas, modern Christians will tell you God's everywhere. God's, in the bathroom when I take a shit. God's doing everything. He's right here right now watching. He's everywhere. But that causes more problems than it solves. Because then it leads to all sorts of nasty moral and ethical and just logistical conundrums too. Like I have heard this said, and it's a brutal, but it's a fair point. Like for people who have had to deal with assault, in their life, then if you go back under this idea of omnipresence, that indicates, according to the doctrine, that he was there the whole time while you were being victimized. And that's not just problematic, that's gross. To think that the omnipotent creator of the universe was there, knew the whole time, everything that was happening to you, and yet, well, he was cool with it. Like, that gets into really nasty territory. And as problematic as the Old Testament Yahweh is, I actually think it makes more sense if you just say, look, he's like Zeus, he goes around and he does some questionable stuff and he's got a kind of a shitty temper and he's not really even cool with his own people, but he can do cool things when he wants to. He can like bring storms and he can, kill enemies and stuff. Like he can do some cool stuff. But if you don't ascribe these fanciful universal properties to him, then some of these horrible logical dilemmas never even become an issue. Like I mentioned before about Calvinism. Under the Calvinist ideal, Yahweh knew before you were born if you were going to burn in hell for eternity. And yet he doesn't care. He still let you be born. He's still going to throw you into, under their ideal. There are competing views of this in Christianity, but under this ideal, he knew before you were born that you were ultimately just dead or fated to spend eternity in eternal conscious torment in the lake of fire or whatever your idea of hell is. But, and who cares? That's the breaks. Sorry. That's monstrous. That is far more monstrous than even the worst actions of Yahweh in the Old Testament. Because as bad as he is in the Old Testament, it's more like just this squabbling, it's like, well, this tribe pissed me off and I'm going to open the earth and swallow 10,000 of them. And, these people started worshiping other idols, and I'm going to, bring drought and famine to them. But that's I actually think that's not as bad as purposely bringing people into the world, knowing that you were only bringing them in the world so that they can spend eternity in conscious torment. That is the antithesis of a loving God. I know Calvinists will try to paint it 10 different ways, but there's no way that you can convince me on any level that there is any degree of love or caring or even give a shit in that kind of model. It's horrific. Anywho, I should have I need like an actual soapbox. When I get really worked up, I'll go stand on the soapbox, but then I'd have to move the microphone around. I don't know. I'm gonna have to work something out here. But again, the original point there, which I loved from this comment, is if you really want to believe that God knows everything into the future and has a plan for you already, what's the point of praying? The Lord's Prayer and other prayers, basically acknowledge that. It's like, thy will be done, which is the dumbest phrase, one of the dumbest phrases I've ever heard in any religion. You're telling the omnipotent creator of the universe to do what he wants to do anyway. What? Was he not going to do what he wanted to do anyway if you didn't tell him that it was okay for him to do what he wanted to do anyway? Yeah, go figure that one out. Okay, so this is, I'm not going to spend all night on this. This is another preview, because this one I go into in detail on Monday's video, which will be tomorrow morning. So set your alarm clocks. I'm sure that you will all be waiting like, ooh, there's another video. I know that's what you guys do every morning. You get up, you get your coffee, you check your watch, you drop a deuce, and then you get on YouTube to find my new video, don't you? Yeah? No? Oh, okay. Well, you'll see it eventually. But this one is the video here. I think you guys can see my cursor. Yeah. This starts from this. So we're not going to go through it all in detail because, again, tomorrow morning's video, but I will still share with you some of the wonderful nuggets. This is essentially, I'm creationist, I'm stupid comment. That's really what it boils down to. I think you can't understand the complexity of life. There is such a wonderful arrogance in that, because anytime someone says that kind of shit to you, what are they implying? They're implying that, well, they can understand it. Like, they get the picture. You just don't understand the complexity of life. Thank you, you arrogant son of a bitch. But when have we ever accused Christians of being humble? There is no mathematical probability of life just happening. Ask Google, what is the probability of one DNA strand coming together? He then proceeds to spew this verbal diarrhea, which is it is just a synopsis of all of the sad and broken talking points of the creationist. So I won't read this all to you, but just as a way of giving you a preview of what tomorrow morning's video is about, I think you will enjoy this, because other than throwing some laugh emojis on this or whatever, usually when I get comments like this, they're so just detached from reality, and they're just spewing all of the talking points that they learned at their Answers in Genesis seminar, and they're not thinking about it at all. And usually it's just a complete waste of time. So I wasn't even going to bother replying much other than to make fun of the guy. And I certainly wasn't going to do a video about it. But then he wrote this, and I thought, this is beautiful. He says, so as usual, you have no rebuttal, which what? Anyone watching this video can see a paraphrase of nonsense. Why? Because you have a set view, and you would rather regurgitate vitriol nonsense than do some sound research. Notice none of these people really know how to formulate a sentence. Is there a connection here? But if you are too lazy at that, then basically let AI do it for you. At heart, you will get a non-biased view. I know where this dumbass is coming from, because on the Answers in Genesis site, I even did a video on this, 5-6 months ago, exposing their bullshit, because they have all these videos about like Grok proves that evolution is false, and ChatGPT proves that the age of the universe is 6. And basically what they do is they feed it all these leading prompts. They feed it prompts that essentially tell it to go look at our own website for the answers, and then Grok or ChatGPT predictably spits back the answers that they want to hear. And the idiots who follow these channels, they don't have the mental capacity to actually see the wires. And when I say that, to be clear, it's sad because the wires are really obvious. It's like a puppeteer where every wire is a big, thick piece of rope, but they still can't see it. Or they don't want to see it, I guess, is the more important point. And I won't bother trying. Oh, here it is. Answers in Genesis Exposed. This was done 5 months ago. But he says, if you just let AI do it for you, because, I'm so lazy, because I don't put any effort into this channel. I just wake up once a month and do 10 minutes of content and that's it. I'm done. That's all. That's the only effort I put into this whole channel. But he says, basically let AI do it for you. So without beating this one to death, because the video will be out tomorrow morning, I did exactly what he suggested. I fed his comment with a very neutral prompt. You'll see it in the video, but I basically said, break down this comment. Tell me the good, tell me the bad, tell me the problematic talking points, tell me any good talking points. I gave it this long prompt with these specific instructions to basically be as neutral and as fair as possible. And I fed his comment into ChatGPT and Gemini, and I didn't have to do anything. ChatGPT basically tore him up and said he was a fucking idiot. And so did Gemini. So enjoy that one tomorrow morning. Set your alarm. It's going to be fun. All right, next. JK, you're freaking me out, man. How'd you know? That's exactly how I start my morning. It's because of the cameras. This is not a one-way thing. Like when you're watching me, I'm watching you. Yep, exactly. Don't do that. I'm watching. See, you think that this is one way. You think that this is synchronous communication, but it's asynchronous. Like I'm watching you, and if you stare into the abyss stares into you. Yeah, that's what happens when you look at an atheist. Your soul melts. You can actually feel your soul like evaporating out of your body or being sucked down to hell. I could probably do that. I could probably condemn people to hell just by staring into their eyes. You feel the pull of Satan. You want to sin, so you should be an atheist. Like, I should be a hypnotist. That would be good. The skeptic hypnotist. And to be fair, hypnotism is a funny field. I've never done much study on it, but I think that hypnotism is real, but not in the way that the magicians do it on TV. I mean, I think that some aspects of hypnotism can be real, but could you imagine being the atheist skeptical hypnotist? That would be a brand that I could own, because I don't think anyone else is in that space. I could create my own niche in YouTube for atheist skeptical hypnotists. Where are we going? I'm going to sing the doom song. Okay, so this was actually a video that I did quite a while ago. This is like the early days of Skepticus. I don't know how many of you guys know, but the channel started in late May last year. So we're coming up on a year. But this was one of the earlier videos I did. Once again, talking about prayer, though. You guys know it's not the only thing I talk about on my channel, but I do sometimes like to just beat people up over this stupid prayer idea. But this is someone who found the video, because that occasionally happens. Although this video's gotten like 300 views. I was really surprised that anyone watched it and commented. But Larry Wilson says, generally, debating the efficacy of prayer is not particularly beneficial. Individuals often provide numerous justifications and rationalizations for why it may not function as intended, or why it operates differently than one might expect. If anyone could demonstrate that prayer genuinely produces results in a verifiable and testable way, numerous religious organizations would have already disseminated that information widely through the media. Couldn't agree more, absolutely. Or another way to put this is that if prayer actually worked, there wouldn't be an operating casino in the world. So I can't, of course, debate the points, but I wanted to bring this up because, there is kind of a question in here kind of baked into it. It's like, it's not particularly beneficial debating the efficacy of prayer. And I totally agree that if you were talking to a believer and they want to tell you that prayer works, there's no point in having that conversation with them. I mean, there literally is nothing productive that's going to come from it. It doesn't matter how many times you can actually show them statistically or probabilistically that anything good that came to you was probably happening anyway, and anything bad, should be put on the ledger too, even though you won't do it. But for a believer, I said earlier in this live stream, if you want to see God in everything, you will see God in everything. If you want to believe that God answers your prayers, then God will answer your prayers. There are so many mental machinations that you can go through to convince yourself that God answered that prayer. So I do totally agree and admit that doing a video saying that God doesn't answer your prayers is on some level, or at least for certain audiences, a pointless endeavor. However, that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop doing any of those videos, because it's not just the true believer who you're trying to yell down from their ivory tower, right? I think that videos like this, personally, potentially have more value for those who maybe they believe, but they've just been thinking critically, and they can't help but notice that anytime prayer is answered, it seems to be a natural phenomenon that would have happened anyway. And they start thinking about it, and then they start dissecting it. So it is useful on some level. But I also like to point out the prayer thing. I mentioned this before, because I think that prayer, it's one thing. I'm not going to go tell your grandma that her prayers aren't getting answered. That's just a dick move, right? Like, don't tell the little old lady that her prayers, she won't believe you. If she did believe you, she'd probably start crying, and you'd feel like shit because, you made grandma cry or something. Like, that's not helpful at all, and should never be attempted unless you just want to be the biggest dick that you can be. And some people maybe would do that, but I don't recommend that. But instead, I think that it's effective to have this conversation not as me to one believer, but as skeptics talking to a broader audience about the toxic nature of this practice. I know I've said this before, and I keep hammering it home, because I really believe that the way that most Christian denominations and Christian churches sell prayer to you is that it is a very toxic relationship. And most Christians whose lives aren't in shambles, they won't admit that there's anything wrong with it. But I've seen people going through really, really, really hard times who are devout, and then it starts to break them up, because not only am I going through hard times, but God doesn't seem to be answering any of my prayers. And then they start to feel like every Christian tells you, they basically tell you it's your fault. They don't say to you it's your fault, but they say, well, you need to confess more of your sins, which is saying you haven't done it right. It's your fault. You need to have a better relationship with God. You need, like, all these different excuses they have for why your prayers aren't getting answered. And every single one of them comes back to something that you've done wrong, or that's something right that you're not doing. It's never God's fault. Every single time a prayer is answered, it's God's glory. And every single time the prayer is not answered, or even worse, things seem to go opposite of what you prayed for, it's never his fault. It's always your fault, every single time. And that's toxic as fuck. Now, again, you're not going to make any hay by trying to tell someone who's an ardent believer this, because if anything, it's just going to be insulting to them, and they'll think you're an idiot. But if you're talking in a broader sense to people about toxic traits of faith and toxic traits of Christianity, although, Christians aren't the only ones who pray, right? But as I know it, in America, this is Christianity. I think that you can have a more productive conversation in that regard. Okay, let's talk about masturbation and menstruation. We're finally to the point in the live stream that you've been waiting for. You're like, when are we going to get to masturbation and menstruation? Have no fear, we're finally there. So this one comment, I thought it was good because it illustrates a theological point that I don't think gets talked about enough. This person on one of my God-Free Bible Study episodes from Leviticus says, masturbation and menstruation all require cleansing rituals. In tribal society and in apes and monkeys, menstruating females will sometimes leave their troops, and in Leviticus, menstruation results in cleansing and isolation. I wanted to highlight this comment. I mean, the comment is accurate. There's nothing particularly profound about it. But I wanted to bring it up just to illustrate a broader point that I don't talk about enough on my channel. And quite frankly, I hear this mentioned very rarely amongst Christians or atheists or anyone else. When you read the Old Testament, especially the Pentateuch, especially the nasty books like Numbers and Leviticus and such, and Deuteronomy, where they're laying out all these laws. Yeah, good thing you got that meal done. When they're laying out these laws, to a modern ear, it sounds really weird because they keep talking about unclean. These animals are unclean, and this practice is unclean, and you're unclean, and unclean, unclean, unclean. And I know that for most of my life, like when I was growing up, I think that I basically read that as like just an old-timey way of saying you've done a bad thing, or that you sinned. But Justin from Deconstruction Zone, I was watching one of his old videos like a few months ago. And in the video, he makes a really good point that I had never properly conceived before. He says that in those times, the reason they keep saying unclean is not because it's metaphorical. It's because under the thinking of the time, they actually thought that being unclean in all of its permutations was not metaphorically similar to sin. They thought it was sin. They thought that, stealing something from your neighbor or jizzing on your pants, they thought that those were both equally bad. Like, because either one, one made you spiritually unclean because you did a bad thing and you sinned, but the other one made you literally unclean because now you've jizzed on your pants. And don't you love what we get into? But when he brought that up, I was like, wow, I never really thought about it in that very literal sense, because suddenly a lot of those old books, they're still just as gross as they've always been, but they start to make a lot more sense, because it's like, why do we keep talking about whether a woman's on her cycle, and why do we keep talking about, if a guy has a defiling skin condition, like, why does this have to be in our holy text? Well, it's in the holy text because it's so long ago in such a bass-ackwards society that when they wrote it, they actually thought that was sin. They didn't think it was ritually the wrong thing. They didn't think it was metaphorically putting in the wrong state for God. They thought that was sin. So that's why so much of the book or the old books, the Pentateuch, read in this weird anachronistic style where it's like, I thought we were supposed to be talking about morals. I thought we were supposed to be talking about love your neighbor and don't steal and don't murder, which, that's in there too. But we're spending all this time talking about skin conditions and menstruation and masturbation and all this other stuff. Well, they thought that because they thought it made them unclean. They thought it made them unclean, which on some level, maybe it does. Like if you're menstruating, okay, there's things you got to clean up there. We have products for that now, but back then they didn't really. But aside from dealing with just hygiene issues, they didn't just see it as, oh, I'm a little dirty today. They thought of it like, no, this is like sinning in the eyes of God. And again, when you think about it that way, it doesn't make the book any better. In fact, in some ways it makes it worse, because it's like, wow, this is so backwards. But at least it puts it in a much more understandable context. In some of the text, while it doesn't sound like something I can support, at least it sounds logical if you understand the worldview. One more note on that before we move on. In the same video, Justin made another really wild point that I'd never considered before. Original sin. Now, ancient Hebrews did not believe in the original sin, but if you think about how disgusting that sounds to any logical person, you're like, whoa, I was born with the sin of a theoretical couple from 3,000 or 4,000 years ago that, ate a fruit off a tree. Like that's so stupid and moronic. But there's actually a shred of logic to it if you think about the way that many people in ye olden times thought about human procreation. So for many years, they knew like sperm was your seed. Like they'd figured that out, right? But they still didn't know how the mechanics worked. They knew that intercourse would happen if it was at the right time of month and everything. And then, baby comes out 9 months later. But they didn't know there was a sperm. They didn't know that inside of the semen there was sperm. And they didn't know that there's, this egg in a woman that's, in her ovaries and all this kind of stuff. They didn't know the inner workings. So until relatively recently. By relatively, I mean like 300 or 400 years ago, there was a prevalent theory of procreation, which was the homunculus idea. And the idea was like, when you have sex with a woman, you are essentially injecting a tiny, 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 tiny version of not of you, but of your son or daughter into her. And then, of course, then it goes inside her and it sits there for 9 months and comes out as a baby and grows up. That was the idea of like but the big problem with that idea, other than the fact that that's not how it works, but the other big theoretical problem of that is that implies then that in your testes, you have tiny little versions of every person. And I don't mean tiny versions like theoretically, like your sperm could meet an egg and then, then create no, I mean, like they thought it was like a tiny version of all the kids that you could have, which would also mean that inside the tiny version of your kids, there would have to be other tiny versions of their kids and so, you get to this infinite regression problem. Why am I going down this path? Only because if you understand that, as weird as that idea is, but people didn't know how shit worked, and they're trying to come up with ideas. Then it almost sort of makes sense, because under that idea, when Adam and Eve sinned, we were all there. We were all there in Adam's nutsack. It's some infinite regress model of, like your grandpa and his grandpa, and, like just tinier and tinier and tinier. Now, you can laugh at it and you can say that, especially when you think about the regress problem, it becomes ridiculous. But for primitive people who don't know how this works, it's at least a theory. And under that theory, even though you still wouldn't have had any conscious part in making Adam and Eve sin, the idea is that, well, on some level, we were all there. So we all got the sin, even if we wouldn't actually be born for a couple thousand years. Did you know we were going there tonight? I bet you didn't know we were going there tonight. Okay, I'm kind of winding down here. It's 2.5 hours, but I'm going to get through a few more. So drink them if you got them. Smoke them if you got them. Throw in the questions if you got them. Otherwise, we're going to find the all-stars. Okay, this has got to be a good one here. It's so simple, but it's so stupid too. So this was on someone responding to a Godfrey Bible study from Joshua, and the whole comment that they left, at least the first comment, was, "How do you not understand that when it's literally explained in the context?" The Joshua video, like almost all my videos, is somewhere around an hour, 55 minutes, something like that. And this response from someone who apparently was not flattering, they were not appreciating my efforts, but they said, "How do you not understand that when it's literally explained in the context?" You might wonder, what is that? Well, of course, because there's no way to know what they mean by that. So you can see, I said, "What are you talking about?" And then this asshole says, "I was talking about your lack of understanding." Again, I can't make you word right. If you can't word right, then I can't come to your house and educate you. Okay. Like, all I can do is put up the videos. And if you refuse to engage intellectually, I can't do much more with that. Okay. My powers, while they are impressive, are still limited, at least in this regard. I would love to be able to help Mark Travis word correctly, but I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, I still don't know what that is. And you can see the final thing I put here. I said, "It's a 43-minute video, and your contention is that I don't understand that." Wow, well played. You clearly have superior knowledge of the Bible. I think Mark Travis is probably today's internet fuckboy. So I need like a medal, we can even like mail them to people's houses, that would freak you out, wouldn't it? If you left a comment on my video and then I mailed something to your house. That would freak people out really badly. I need to find some way to reverse hack from comments I mean, it's completely unethical, but work with me. It's just sounds fun. That would fuck with someone's head so bad. You remember that shitty comment you left on my blog or on my video 2 months ago? Okay, I'm sick. I should not be thinking of these horrible things. Okay, here's another idiot of the day. There are so many idiots. I mean, the sheer unadulterated volume of stupidity that rains down, not just on my channel, of course, but just on a daily basis. It's mind-boggling. So this is a person replying to the Glenn Scrivener, Dan McClellan video. And I'll read the whole thing here because I just think you'll see where the stupid is. But meltdown is a bit of a stretch because that was in the title. The truth is, Dan has a very narrow specialization in cognitive linguistics and Near Eastern religion. I think he specializes in something to do with spirits in ancient Israelite religion, which that's not fucking accurate at all, or something like that. I don't know where he gets this shit. Like, did he sit on the can and just scribble until this came out? I don't know. His arguments against the Trinity in his recent videos go deep into philosophical territory where Dan has no formal training whatsoever. He has every right to talk about things well outside of his expertise, but that does not automatically imply that Dan's arguments are good. I even saw a Muslim with philosophical training, Jake Brancatella, fire back against Dan on these videos, which should tell you a lot. It doesn't tell me anything, but try again. Whether you think the Trinity is incoherent or not, people should be able to recognize bad arguments. Dan used very simplistic, outdated, and naive arguments in a subject he has not bothered to study thoroughly, and he rightfully got lash back for it. Even by non-Trinitarians. Glenn Scrivener is right. Dan does have a halo effect, and this video proves it. I've said this in other videos before, and I'm going to come across as a Dan McClellan fanboy, and that's fine because I am. I don't think he's perfect. He's done some stuff that I, at least disagreed with around the edges. But the amount of ridiculous vitriol that he gets is just, it shouldn't surprise me, but it blows my mind sometimes because if you watch Dan's done a lot of videos on the Trinity, and he's pretty, ardent in his contention that the Trinity is not in the Bible. Dan never once, I don't believe, has ever told anyone that the Trinity is not true. I have never heard him say those words, and I don't think he ever would. He's not talking about is the Trinity is true, because I think Dan's smart enough to know that if that's your doctrine, then that's your doctrine, whatever. Believe whatever you want to believe. He is talking about the Bible and what's in the Bible. He's talking about whether there is, Christians, the ones who get really ate up in Trinitarian philosophy, they will tell you that it's just the whole damn book is about the Trinity. They'll tell you that Jesus is on every fucking page. They will go nuts with it. But at the end of the day, Dan is like, that's not in the Bible. Now he doesn't say this, but I mean, you can believe the Trinity all you want. He's never tells someone that the Trinity is not that there. I don't think he ever will. I don't think he believes in it personally, but he's not going to tell you that your own theoretical doctrines are wrong. He's telling you what's in the Bible, and that's his fucking specialty. His specialty is Bible. He's a scholar of the Bible, and he always opens his video, says, he's a scholar of the Bible, and something else he always says. I forget what his tagline is, but the shit that people, then throw, where's the bad argument? And we're not going to sit here, go through the arguments he gave, but where's the bad argument? He's never arguing against the Trinity being something you can believe in. He's arguing about what people want to pick out of the Bible and pretend that that's the Trinity. A hardcore Orthodox Trinitarian Christian can just pull any page of the Bible up and go, see, that's the Trinity right there. I mean, I'm serious. They will do that. And it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And then they'll turn around and they'll tell you that you're not a Christian because you don't believe in the exact same iteration of the Trinity that they believe in. It's so rich. Grumpy says, Dan's argument has never been about the philosophy. That's funny. I didn't read this, but I think we were saying the same thing, Grumpy. His argument is purely about the timing of when those philosophies developed. And he's definitely qualified to do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I would also argue his arguments also about what is or is not in the Bible itself. But you're right. He talks a lot about the timing, and he talks about the fact that the Trinity is a post-biblical convention. Now, if you want to get into your foo-foo spiritual ideas, about Christianity, you can still claim that, like, John, for example, the book of John has the Gospel of John has a very high Christology. Okay. And this is where I disagree with Dan a little bit, because sometimes he's done some videos kind of arguing against the high Christology of the Gospel of John. And I think I'm not qualified to say this of Dan, but I think sometimes he gets too in the weeds on that one. Because it's one thing to say that the Trinity is not there. It's another thing to read the book of John and say that there's not a very high Christology there. Like, I think you're reaching. That's my personal opinion. But where was I going you could argue that whether the people knew about the concept when they were writing the books or not doesn't mean that the concept is not in the books, right? Because if we believe that it's divinely inspired, then in theory, the book could say anything, like if it's divinely inspired, then I could write a tome tomorrow that talks about futuristic advancements in quantum physics. Now, I don't know anything about quantum physics other than layman speak or whatever. So you might say, well, how could I do that? Well, if it's divinely inspired, I could, right? I mean, that would be one theological way to back out of it and say, no, it really is there. But Dan points out, rightfully so, that other than appealing to divine authority or divine inspiration, there is no reason to believe that anywhere during the writing of the books themselves that anybody even had the conception of a Trinity. The first, I said this in another video, but I think the first written reference to the Trinity was by Athanasius, and I think it was mid-2nd century, but don't quote me, I'd have to look that up. But you know what I'm saying? It's like well after the books were written. Moving on. Oh, this is fun. Just got a few more. You guys are still paying attention, right? I need full attention through this entire video. A few of you said earlier that you're gonna be like gaming on all the screens, and I let that pass for now. But just know that in the future, that's not gonna be allowed. I mean, you're gonna need to pay attention, take notes. It's a long stream, but I really need you guys to be, on point with this whole thing. Oh, more stupidity from the Glenn Scrivener Dan McClellan video. It's got secular scripture says, I'm kind of fading here, but unless the cat has to go out, I'm here. Cool. Hang with us. We're almost done. I have faith in you. This person says, I'll explain to you even though I haven't watched your whole video. I love when people say shit like this. There's been times when I can tell that they read the title and didn't watch any of the video, and then they put some shitty comment. But not that I can force everyone to watch all of a video, of course. You can always click off anytime you want. But to open your argument with, like, here's my braying jackass of a comment, but oh, by the way, I didn't watch the whole video. Like, okay, tell me you're a fucking idiot without telling me that you're a fucking idiot. All right. I'll explain to you, even though I haven't watched your whole video, why Glenn can use dogma over data. Because Dan is a Mormon, and he's bringing his dogma, is preconceived teachings to the Trinity debate. It can be postulated that he's not looking at the data from the New Testament, that he's using his dogma to explain it away, because the Mormons don't believe in the Trinity. That's why he can say dogma over data when it comes to Dan's argument. Did you even know that Dan is a Mormon? Which, first of all, is fucking hilarious. Not only did I know he's a Mormon, but I probably know more about it than he does, just because I watched a lot of Dan's videos. And from what I understand, Dan was an official member of the church. He was even a translator for the church. There's some debate amongst people now how much he's still an active member of the Mormon church. I think that he's probably technically a member, but I don't know. That's a lot of conjecture too, not just on my part. I've heard other people kind of speculating about this now, but he still identifies as Mormon. I knew that. I mean, anyone who's watched, spent any time investigating him at all knows that. Thanks for the insight, fucking idiot. But so I'll just read to you. you know, basically my response here, because it kind of says everything you need to know about this. I said, I'm well aware that Dan is a Mormon, although the extent to which he's active in Mormonism is open to debate. And while I do understand and appreciate your "it's a Mormon thing" explanation, no, I actually don't appreciate it, but I was trying to be kind of nice, I guess. But it was such a stupid argument. I'm sorry, but that just does not hold water. There is nothing in Dan's presentation that says a single thing about Mormonism. At no point does he ever say the Trinity isn't true, because Mormonism teaches, yes, it's true that Dan is presumably a Mormon, but at no point does he lean on anything that is remotely Mormon to make his points. All of his points are rooted in data. In other words, the data of like what's in the Bible, or the data of what we know from the historical record after the books were written as to when the Trinity was introduced and debated as a doctrine. Not Mormon doctrines. So to state that there's any validity to Glenn's points merely because Dan is Mormon is to commit the genetic fallacy. There is a name for this, you idiot. It's the genetic fallacy. You don't have to agree with Dan's arguments, but his arguments would be every bit as valid if he were a Christian or a Hindu or a Pastafarian, because Dan's arguments are based on data. It's the genetic fallacy. It's also a bit of a no true Scotsman, right? Because it's, you know, it's the same argument that you get time and time again from people like, well, you know, of course you're biased and you're wrong because you're not a Christian. I don't have to be, I mean, personally I was a Christian, but even if I had never been a Christian, I don't have to be a Christian to understand when you're making a stupid fucking argument. Christians shockingly don't have a monopoly on horrible arguments, although sometimes you would be forgiven for thinking that they do. Oh, let's see. AB, or Aaron Higashi, is a scholar with a small YouTube channel who's a Trinitarian, and he is quite open that the Bible in no way alleges the Trinity and that he believes it purely on faith. Yeah, I think we talked about that on the previous live screen too. Hey, Dragon Tamer. That is one of the things that bothers me the most about the Trinitarian police that are out there. I mean, even when I was a Christian, I was always a member of denominations that were fully Trinitarian, and on paper, I would tell you that I believed in the Trinity, but even when I was a Christian, if you cornered me on it, I'd say, yeah, it doesn't make any damn sense. It's just, any Christian who says that it's perfectly logical is lying to you, or they've just drank their own Kool-Aid. I mean, some of them aren't lying because some of them had just been brainwashed with it for so long. But if you actually ask them to explain it, they can never explain it in a coherent way. There is no coherent explanation for it. That being said, you know, like Grumpy saying about Aaron Higashi, I mean, I don't care if you're a Trinitarian, be a Trinitarian, but if anyone tries to say anything that in any way questions the completely incoherent and nonsensical formulation of the Trinity as it exists in modern Christianity, they won't just say that they disagree with you. They will actually accuse you of being a heretic. They'll tell you that you're not a Christian. And that to me is deeply insulting. It's just really ridiculous. As a software engineer, can you back up my statement? Yay, trains. What, Dragon Tamer? I mean, I am a software engineer, but can you back up my statement? Yay, trains. I mean, I don't have anything against trains. I guess I could say yay, trains if they had like a drink car or something. Like, I don't know what that. You have to give me more detail because I don't know how I'm supposed to back that up. But and Grumpy says, I always love when rank and file Christians try to explain the Trinity by using modalism, which was an early heresy. Yeah, that's a great point, because if a lot of people who don't truly know the full, by the book, proper explanation for the Trinity, even when they don't realize it, will end up giving you an explanation that unbeknownst to them, ends up drifting into heresy. And I mean, I'm not mad at them for that, because it's an incoherent doctrine. But it's funny how even people who are devout Christians, and they'll tell you that they totally believe in the Trinity, and then some of them, at least, not all of them, of course, but some of them, as Grumpy is saying, when you actually press them on it and try to get them to explain it, then a lot of times they will end up giving you some kind of explanation, trying to make it make sense, which actually ends up being heretical according to the dictates of the church itself, which is really funny. Okay. One more. Last comment. You guys have almost made it. We should drink to that. All right. So this is, more about the, well, actually, I brought this up before. So, but I think I wanted to highlight just one thing about this again, because, Heretical Buttermilk says, the flat earth and the Trinity are both falsifiable. Both can be disproven mathematically. The Trinity is literally a logical fallacy. So as much time as I have just spent spewing about the Trinity and how I will tell you that it's incoherent, this may sound a little contradictory. I do not believe that the Trinity is falsifiable. Here's why. Because anything that flows from an unfalsifiable construct is, I would conjecture, unfalsifiable. Meaning, God himself, we talked about this at length earlier, or I did. I say we, like we're having, like you're sitting in my living room. You're kind of sitting in my living room. But God in the modern, classic Neoplatonic ideal is unfalsifiable. I will die on that hill. I think that conjecture of God is so vague, so magical, so ethereal, so omni everything that it cannot in totality be disproven. It's unfalsifiable. So flowing that you have this unfalsifiable magic everything sky daddy construct for God, then how do you falsify any other bullshit claims that you've attached to the already unfalsifiable construct? See, having this ridiculous unfalsifiable construct kind of serves also as an umbrella. It kind of shields any other crap you want to say about God, because when God is omni everything, then anything I say about God, I won't say it makes sense, but it kind of can't be argued against. So when you say that God is three persons, is one God in three persons, I'm screwing it up. When you say that God is one God in three persons, what does that mean? I mean, that doesn't make sense. I could sit there with a syllogism and tell you, I could craft a syllogism and say, okay, this is false. It's falsifiable. The premises of this syllogism are false. And we could probably all read my syllogism and say, yes, you have disproven the Trinity. Except that when you put it in the broader syllogism of, I have a magic everything omni-God who has no constraints. He can be as imaginary or as concrete. He can be everywhere and nowhere. He can do everything, then even the ability to apply basic logic to this God breaks down. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Some Christians will argue, like, can God do an illogical thing? Can God create a triangle with four sides? As stupid as that sounds, I would argue that even God cannot, I don't believe in God, but even God, if there was one, cannot create a triangle with four sides. But if you want to cling to the most ridiculous, expansive definition of God that you can, and some Christians do, meaning you think that he can literally do anything he wants. He can create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it. Like the classic contradictions. If you want to get that far into it, if you want to buy in that desperately, then how do I falsify anything about your God? Because you're basically telling me that your God isn't even confined by simple, obvious, ontological logic. Now, to be fair, not every Christian will die on a hill. And, there's a lot of Christians who are more reasonable who could say, no, God cannot create a triangle with four sides. But others will. So I guess the falsifiability of the Trinity is partially dependent upon how are we defining God, and it's partially dependent upon how fanatical and illogical is your audience. So that's my kind of weird take on the Trinity, because you might think I'd say, yeah, I can totally falsify that. And like I said, in a basic syllogism, I can. I haven't done it, but I'm sure I could sit down and do a couple basic syllogisms and say, this doesn't make any sense. It literally doesn't make any sense. But then when you wrap it into but it's the mystery of God. Well, then all syllogism go out the window. We've taken logic and we just set it right over here. And we said, okay, brain, I won't be using you today. I'm going to church. So you brain goes right here. And then I'm going to just be in magic Sky Daddy land. So it's falsifiable, but depends. It depends on your audience. And you can say, well, a syllogism shouldn't, the falsifiability or unfalsifiability of a syllogism shouldn't depend on your audience, right? I mean, it should either be true or false. And that's, of course, theoretically accurate. But if you want to actually show someone who's a Christian that you can falsify the Trinity, well, then it's a non-starter, because they're not going to listen to the logic in the first place. They're not going to care about your syllogism. They're not going to care about your premises and your conclusions. They're just going to say, because God. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. Let's see. Dragon Tamer says, Christianity is a big ball of contradictions. There are mysteries that people refuse to accept. There are no good solutions to. Exactly. That's kind of the same thing I was saying too. Yeah, totally. So for reasonable people, and yes, I'm even including Christians in that, because there are reasonable Christians out there. You can have reasonable conversations about these things. But for the fundamentalists, for the evangelical set, those kind of people, no, it's not even a point. Grumpy says, I always love what, I'm sorry, I already read that one. Secular Scripture says, magic eggs. I always wondered who was which part and who the other parts of an egg belonged to. Yeah, exactly. So part of that's just talking in circles, I guess, because you can say, well, if basically what I'm saying is, if someone won't accept logic, then you can't expect to falsify anything in their brain, because they're not thinking logically, which really takes it out of the realm of syllogisms altogether, doesn't it? Then we're just now we're in the arena of mental health specialists, because you're dealing with some people that aren't really firing on all cylinders. But some people in faith are like that. Not all of them, but some really are. So it just depends on your audience. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And you can see, I said here in the comments, I said, yeah, I want to bring this up in a live stream, because I said there that I don't think you can truly falsify the Trinity, or at least not in a way that's satisfying, because you're trying to make a point to someone who believes in it. You can falsify the Trinity to me, but that's not much of an accomplishment, is it? It's like, congratulations, you convinced me that the Trinity makes no fucking sense. That took a lot of work. Well, ladies, gentlemen, Grumpy, I think it's been a full night. It's getting kind of late here. It's probably later where you are. I thank every one of you. I appreciate you guys. Man, some of you have really been around. Like, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm like, yeah, some people, like, it's not like, I'm not saying this to gripe, but I am kind of jealous, like some of these stations or channels that can do a live stream and there's like 200 people or 300 people, and not that I'm upset with the 20 some of you guys that are here. Yes, the plushies, awesome plushies. We have to remember them as our guests today, and we're going to bring them back, because we're going to have more plushies. What were these? Neffy and Beelzebuddy. Neffy and Beelzebuddy. So say goodnight to Neffy and Beelzebuddy. Good night to JK. Thank you for being with us. And I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate anyone who dropped in at any time. But if you watch this whole thing, then I love you, but you probably have made poor life choices. But I guess I'm benefiting from that. Thank every one of you. I appreciate all of you. And the new video will be out tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Central. So check it out. I think you guys will enjoy it. You guys have a great night. Well, I haven't disconnected yet. I just see this Taco Joe. Adam, you haven't joined Justin at Deconstruction Zone yet. There was someone else who was telling me that I should go on his thing, but here's the thing. I've never tried. I've given him some super chats just to show love. I've never tried to call into his show because he very specifically wants believers. And I understand why he wants believers, because if you get another atheist on the line, it's just two guys jerking each other off about, yeah, you're right, God's bullshit, all of the Bible's stupid, like there's conflict drives his show. And I mean that with love. I don't mean it like he's, like some carnival barker, but I remember I was watching, he did a live stream with Derek from Myth Vision. And in that one, they've just started doing like these live streams with Derek. And he was saying at the time, he was like, yeah, I'd really like to get believers on, and get past the people. And it's not that Justin doesn't like the people that are non-believers. He understands if you're a non-believer, but in terms of what really he actually said during that live stream with Derek, he said that on his own live streams, if he gets someone on the call who's not essentially butting heads with him, he can literally see the viewers start to drop off. Not right away, but slowly they start dropping off, because let's face it, if you are sitting around and watching Justin for a couple hours, you probably kind of get off on, hearing the idiots that are going toe to toe with him, and everything. So that's why I have not tried to call into Justin's show, because I know he wants believers, and I don't want to be like, hey, I know you want believers, but I just want to call in and tell you you're awesome and let's talk about atheism. I don't think he'd want that anyway, And what am I going to talk to him about? I mean, we're not going to sit there and talk about atheism. He wants to show the fuckery in religious viewpoints, and he's not going to get me arguing in favor of religious viewpoints. So that's, so it says here, come into the live stream tomorrow night. You can hang out in the box and provide commentary. I would love to do that, Taco Joe. I'm going to sound really ignorant here, because I don't know. How do I even do that? How do I be, is there a different number I call? Or I don't know how that happens, that I become one of the ones hanging out in the box. But I'd love to do that. I've never, had a chance to interact with Justin in any way, but I would be honored to be someone just, even if I wasn't saying much, to be, in the box or whatever, that'd be really cool. I would love it. Says you don't have to be the primary caller. Justin has guest debunkers all the time. We had 2 on Friday night. So either in the chat or shoot me an email on the channel, or put a comment on the video here, because this will get posted afterwards. In other words, my point is, tell me, I don't know what I do to make that happen. Is there a link I go to, or a magic button that I push or something? I'm not sure. So I just need a little guidance. But I'd be honored to do it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So call in through the link on the screen, and then I assume someone will pick up, and I'll just say, hey, I'm not here to debate Justin, but I'd like to be a guest debunker, I guess. And then they would put me through in the box. I guess that's what you're saying. So yeah, if that's the case, then yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. And assuming I don't think I have anything going on tomorrow night. So, I mean, my point is I don't have my schedule. So if I'm not there, don't feel like I ignored you, but I'm almost certain I can do it. So, or if not, then another night, but I'll do that then. I'll do that. And Grumpy says, Mr. Deity and Apologia have been known to give shout outs to small channels too. I got to say this is going to sound really petty, and I don't care. I was watching Mr. Deity's channel this week, and he gave a shout out to someone else. And he gave a shout out to someone who does a cool channel. I forget who it was. And I felt this little bit of jealousy. I was like, why does he shout out my channel? It's though, I have to be above someone else or something, but it was funny. All right, so Justin will see me in the waiting room. Okay, so I will almost certainly make a point to do that tomorrow, and I would love to participate. I'd love to get some of the reflected glory of Justin. He's so damn knowledgeable and such. He seems like a cool guy. I mean, I don't know what he's like personally, but he seems awesome. All right, guys, I'm saying goodbye again. Thank you, Taco Joe, for the information. So I will, and for anyone still on, or for anyone who views this later, check me out, as a guest debunker or something on Justin's channel. Even if I'm not on the you should always check out Deconstruction Zone, because that guy has forgotten more about the Bible than I will ever learn. he's just super magic Bible man. So he's pretty cool. So I'll see you guys later, and I appreciate every one of you, and you guys have a great night.